Good evening. We'll convene the meeting of the Haverford Township Zoning Hearing Board of Thursday, July 22nd, 2021. Present at the front table to my far left, Nora Vitale, Chief Assistant to the Zoning Board. Next to Nora is Jessica Vitale, a voting member. To my immediate left, Ed McGargy, a voting member. My immediate right, Bill Rhodes, a voting member. To Bill's right, Jesse Poynton, sorry, Jess, a voting member. And
all my life.
next to Jesse, Kelly Kirk, our zoning officer, and Margie Buchanan, the assistant zoning officer for Haverford Township. We have two continued cases on the agenda tonight. One is just going to be called for the purpose of submitting an exhibit, and that case will be closed, and then we'll get right into Z2112. Bill, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Sure. Please stand if you can and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right. Our first continued case is Z21-22. Adama Kafa, owner of 2901 Haverford Road, Ardmore, PA, DC folio number 2206-0103800, who seeks a variance from the provisions of section 182727C1 and to erect 85 feet of 4-foot aluminum fence that will encroach the required 20-foot front yard setback by 20 feet. Property is owned R6 and located in the 6th Ward.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
Okay, so you handed into the township what you've pre-marked as exhibits A6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Yes.
6 is the plot plan that we requested from you. The rest are photographs.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
I only had one question. On Exhibit 6, it shows at Malvern, there's an arrow that says 5 feet, and in front of Haverford Road, it shows 6 feet, and on the rear, it shows 6 feet. Was the fence on the Haverford Road side 4 feet or 6 feet? I thought it was 4 feet in the front and 6 along, or 5 along the side. I just wanted to make sure that was an intentional change.
No, the 6 here is carrying from the sidewalk to the actual
Oh,
fence.
that you're
not
showing the
height.
setback. Okay.
Correct.
So then the height, though, will be as you testified
4,
before.
yes, and then
4,
5.
and then it would, at the house edge.
Yes.
Leading front edge of the house, it would switch to 5 and stay consistent all the way to the back.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
All right. Any other questions?
No, I do appreciate the, not only the plot plan that has the measurements of that makes me more comfortable looking at this, but the photographs are also of the front yard, and the aerial photographs are definitely advantageous to really understand the problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Let me just ask one more question. We had talked about maybe angling the corner, but is the idea of exhibits 8 and I guess 7, or at least 7 and 8, that you don't really feel that you need to set it back because there's no other obstructions on the view angle?
There is no obstruction. I would talk to the people that are actually doing the fence once it's approved.
Jesse, what'd you call it?
Chamfer.
So at the last hearing, and yes, I did remember,
Yeah.
you said you would chamfer the corner where the intersection is. You're still
Correct.
willing to do that?
Yes, I just
Okay.
need to talk to the folks that are doing the fence.
All right. Anything else? With that, we'll close the record on this case, and the decision will be rendered either this evening or at our next regularly scheduled meeting on August 5th. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our next case, Z21-12, Dana B. Hall, owner of 701 Haverford Road, Haverford, PA, DC folio number 2205003500, who seeks a variance from the provisions of section 182-802D1 to allow an existing non-conforming retail use to be changed to a restaurant use which is not permitted in the R6 zoning district, and a variance from provisions of section 182-707B to allow fewer than required 10 off-street parking spaces. Property is on R6 and located in the 5th Ward. And I should have mentioned that our solicitor, Bill Malone, is participating via Zoom. So that's who you see on the screen behind us, or, yeah, there he is. Okay. I did have an opportunity to read the transcripts and watch the hearing, the video of the hearing before tonight. So there, I realize there are some things we need to work out before we actually begin taking testimony. Are you Pam? Yes. Okay, you want to enter your appearance, Pam?
I've been on Zoom for about 16 months. Can you, I have submitted my entry of appearance, and would you like me to do anything else?
Well, your full name, and if you have a business card, you can give it to Eileen. That'd be terrific.
Yes, I've spoken to Eileen. My name is Pamela M. Lockman. I'm an attorney, and I have been hired to represent a community group called the Brynford Neighbors for the Preservation of Residential Zoning. There are approximately 20 members, I believe 20 I just counted. They all live in close proximity to the property in issue here, where a variance is requested. And for that reason, I ask that you grant us party status.
As a group, not individual.
As a group.
Okay, so I believe Doreen Czar, Dr. Gail Farrelly Semerad, and Joshua Kui requested and were granted party status at the last hearing. Are any of those three on your list?
Yes, all three are on our list, and that, to be honest, was a belt and suspenders strategy in case you did not grant us party status. If you do, then we can merge everyone into the group.
Well, we will.
Thank you.
And I'd like to have them withdraw their party status, individual party status on the record and enter into the group.
Okay,
Just
would
so
you
we have a
like them
clean
to do
record.
that
Yes.
individually?
No.
I would ask that if we do this, it is understood that should there be an appeal, there would be no objection to our group having status as opposed to the individuals having party status from the township, because they are slightly different.
You're appearing tonight, and we're permitting you to present to the board on behalf of the 20 residents, and I assume you'll submit a list.
Yes, I have. Maybe it hasn't been circulated yet, but we have a copy of our list of residents with their signatures, addresses, and dates for you.
Do you have that, Kelly?
They were in the blue folder?
This one, Kel.
Is it a particular subset of these pages?
It's not. It's just the piece of paper. I apologize. I have it.
Okay, but those three names in particular are on the list, right?
Yes.
Doreen, Gail, and Josh.
It is this document. It is 2 pages, and it is full of signatures.
Okay, that's the list of residents that you will represent tonight.
Correct.
Okay, is that an extra copy, Pam?
This is a copy.
Okay. No, is the copy wrong? Is the copy wrong? Are we able to make copies of this list if I ask you to? Okay. Would
Can I
you
submit
mind
this?
if Kelly goes and makes copies for the board for you? Yeah, that's individual. So Pam, you represent the people on that list individually, right? Not Brynford, I forget all the words that you
Both.
use.
So if we merge everyone into the group, then I just represent the group.
It's a group of individuals.
Go ahead.
And I also represent the individuals, but we can, in case you didn't grant us party status, then we would be able to go ahead this evening. If you do grant us party status as a group, then we can just go ahead with the group.
Right, so what we're trying to figure out is, are we granting party status to 20 individuals? And how does this group exist? Is it an unincorporated association and it has a charter and it takes formal action?
Yes,
And they've adopted a resolution engaging council and deciding to become a party status as an entity, and Kelly's not here.
Yes.
It's a recognized entity. How does the entity exist as an unincorporated? I know that it can, I'm just wondering how it does.
yeah. It is a group that came together and decided to form an unincorporated association for the purpose of preserving residential zoning in Brentford, as well as for the purpose of opposing an application for a use variance at 701 Haverford Road.
Hey, Pam, I'm not, and I don't think any of the board members are familiar with that group as an organization, so I'm inclined to grant party status to your group of individuals as opposed to Brentford Association for the Preservation of Zoning, or whatever the actual name is. But I would ask our solicitor what his opinion is. Bill?
Yes, I think you can do it one of two ways. You could grant party status to all 20, or I do believe that you can incorporate and grant party status to the group with the understanding that the 3 individuals previously named would therefore be incorporated into the group and would not have separate party status on their own.
Okay. So let's do it that way. You want to describe that one more time, Bill? The group, not the organization.
Right, I would grant party status to the group as long as there's an agreement and understanding that the 3 individuals are now merging with the group and are not individually also presenting on their own, that they're simply a part of the group and don't have individual party status. Their party status goes through the group at this point.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do is be amenable and cognizant of where we stand and what a timely appearance before the board means. And since this has been bouncing around, I think this would be the easiest way to incorporate that. Any prior testimony of these individuals could be incorporated into the group's testimony as well.
Okay. Is that clear for you, Pam?
Yes, it is. And I should have added before that under the NPC, I won't cite the exact section, either a civic association or a community association may participate in a zoning hearing board matter and may have counsel represent them.
Oh, absolutely. Do you have a copy of the charter with everything tonight?
What I have is what is being distributed now.
So we're basically going to, in order that we may proceed tonight, I think we arrive at the same place by giving collectively party status to the group that you represent,
Thank you.
without necessarily recognizing the organization unless we take testimony and receive evidence to show who the organization is, who the officers are, the copy of the charter, or whatever. But we land in the same spot, so it doesn't matter. You're going to represent this group of 20 individuals. I'm happy that you are, believe me. It causes a more organized hearing. So if you're okay with that, we'll proceed. I'll just ask Doreen, Gail, and Joshua to come up and express their interest in withdrawing their individual party status and merging with the group.
Yes. One of the individuals who entered their appearance, Lauren Cabanas, is at a board meeting tonight, and she is coming here as soon as possible, sometime after 8:30. So she is not here yet, but Doreen and Josh are.
Okay, so she's on your list of 20, but I don't think she was granted individual party status at the last hearing.
She entered yesterday, I believe.
She didn't make the request of the board.
No,
Therefore,
she
it was
did
not
not.
granted. Therefore, no party status exists for her at this point.
Okay,
So I don't see a need to
okay,
merge
so
it.
then we don't have to.
Cal, do you have any written submissions that,
I do. It was sent to Mr. Malone.
okay, Billy,
Yes, I saw it and it would have been addressed tonight. So I think when the individual gets here, we can simply dispose of that at that time.
okay. And that's what we'll do. So let's just have Doreen, Gail, and Joshua come up. Are you guys here? And if you just state your full name for the record.
Doreen Saar.
How do you do, Doreen? How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Been a while. Been a while.
Yes, we tend to see each other a lot here.
Occasionally. So is it your desire to withdraw your individual party status request and merge with the group?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi, how are you?
Dr. Gail Frawley-Simrad? Yes. Sure. Farallly hyphen S as in Sam, EMERA, D as in David.
You heard what I just went through?
Yes.
Is it your desire to withdraw your individual party status and merge that into the group's party status?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Please state your full name for the record.
Joshua Dupuy?
Is that D-U-P-U-I-S?
Correct.
Got it from the tape. Is it your desire to withdraw your individual party status and merge your status into the group?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Joshua. All right, one remainder. And Pam, if you would point out to me when the person who arrives that submitted a written request to the township, I don't have a copy of that request. It never found its way through our solicitor to me because it was just received today.
I assume it would be moved if you're recognizing.
Yeah, because the party status wasn't granted, so there's no need to really withdraw it and merge it into the group. If her name's on the list, then it's all good. Oh. Yeah, that's all right. I wouldn't have granted it on this anyway. Okay, there's one more. That's all right, I'll go with Mr. Mr. Viola, would you please come forward and state your full name for the record?
Vincent M. Viola Jr.?
Okay, now, it was unclear to me, you sort of walked away when Mr. Rhodes asked your question, not intentionally or in a bad way, just as if you were done, as to whether or not you wanted individual party status or you were a party to the case because of your relationship to the applicant. So is it your desire to have individual party status? And what that means is you have an individual opportunity to cross-examine witnesses and things of that nature, because the case in chief, the applicant's case in chief has already been completed. So it's really more of a cross-examination of opposing witnesses at this point. So is it your desire to have individual party status or?
Yes.
Okay, what exactly is your relationship to the applicant?
I knocked on her door one day and asked her if she wanted to rent out her building, so that's the only
So
relationship
you're
I
gonna
have
be
with
the
her.
occupant.
Yes.
And where do you live?
758 Humphreys Road, Ardmore, Pennsylvania.
Bill Malone?
I have no reason to say he should not be granted party status since he is the proposed tenant of the building.
Okay, so after each witness that testifies, and Pam does direct of that witness, I'm going to ask you if you have any questions.
Okay.
So if you do, we just need to keep it professional and non-confrontational.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Pam?
Thank you. Will you let me make a quick opening statement, or would you prefer that I just go right into a witness? Okay. So once again, my name is Pamela Lockman. I'm here representing the Brynford Neighbors for the Preservation of Residential Zoning. I was not here for the first two hearings, but I have watched them on YouTube. And one thing that I was struck by was that here, in the hearing, I didn't hear a discussion of the overarching concepts of what a use variance was. So if you will just indulge me for one moment, I'm sure you were doing this back in executive session, but for the people who were not with you. So the municipality's planning code authorizes the zoning hearing board to hear variance applications where it's alleged that sorry. The municipality's planning code authorizes the zoning hearing board to hear variance applications where it is alleged that the ordinance inflicts an unnecessary hardship on the applicant. The board may grant a variance, provided that all of the findings are made where relevant. And then there's a list in the MPC, and Haverford Township has adopted an identical list of factors. So let's go to Haverford Township's code. If you would like to receive a variance, and there are two kinds, there's a dimensional variance and a use variance. This applicant is asking for a use variance, which is a much harder thing to get than a dimensional variance, which is like a certain amount of feet or some measurement off a dimension. This is about the use of a property. So Haverford Township Code says that the applicant must show that there are unique physical circumstances or conditions peculiar to, I'll cut out the parts, I'll cut to the chase, peculiar to the property, and that the unnecessary hardship is due to such conditions and not to the circumstances or conditions generally created by the provisions of this chapter in the neighborhood or district where the property is located. That because of such, next factor number 2, because of such physical circumstances or conditions, there is no possibility that the property can be developed in strict conformity with the provisions of this chapter, and that the authorization of a variance is therefore necessary to enable reasonable use of the property. That such a third factor, that such unnecessary hardship has not been created by the applicant. The fourth one, the variance, if authorized, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or district in which the property is located, nor substantially or permanently impair the appropriate use or development of adjacent property, nor be detrimental to the public welfare. And the fifth factor, that the variance, if authorized, will represent the minimum variance that will afford relief and represent the least modification possible of the regulation in issue. In addition, the applicant here is being asked to show how her request for a use variance complies with the minimum parking standards under the Haverford Code. One of the issues that has come up as well is whether the non-conforming convenience store use at 701 Haverford Road is active or has been abandoned. The burden of proof is on the applicant. The evidence here will show the applicant has not met her burden of proof. The desire to reap greater financial benefit is not an unnecessary hardship. It's not grounds for a use variance. There's nothing unusual about the physical property that prevents residential use. In fact, she owns three other adjoining properties. 2 of them have houses on them, and at least one of the houses is currently active as a residence. There's no unnecessary hardship, and that is what the evidence will show. With that in mind, I'd like to call my first witness, which is Frank Tavani.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Full name and the capacity in which you appear for the board, please.
Frank Tavani, I am a traffic engineer.
But you're here as an expert, Frank?
Yes, sir.
You're not part of the group or anything?
Correct.
Okay. Bill?
Good evening, Mr. Devaney. We've met before, in fact, before this board, is that correct?
Yes, I recognize many of the faces and names.
And when you last testified, you established your credentials as well as your licensure in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, correct?
That's correct.
Since that time, has that licensure been suspended, revoked, or have you been admonished in any way in your professional capacity?
I have not.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. King.
Okay. Any discussion or objection from any of the board members? If not, we'll accept Frank Tabani as a traffic expert. Go ahead, Pam.
Mr. Tavani, have you been asked to render a study and opinion about the request for a use variance at 701 Haverford Road?
Yes,
Okay. Have you done so?
yes,
Would you please tell us what your findings are?
certainly. My undertaking included reviewing a traffic study dated June 11th, 2021 by Benchmark Civil Engineering Services, and I also produced a report of my own dated July 21st. Not sure if there's an exhibit number. There's Exhibit 1 is dated July 21st. It's 15 pages and includes 5 pages of text and 10 pages of support material. And how I began my investigation.
Is this your exhibit that you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, so it hasn't been marked, so I'm sure Pam wants to have it marked. Is this it?
Yes.
All right, so the marking scheme we're going to use for your group is P, for protestant.
Okay.
So this would be P1. That's what you request.
Yes, please. Yes, please. P1.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So P1 is indicated as 15 pages, 5 pages of text, 10 pages of backup material. As I indicated, my efforts began by reviewing the applicant's traffic study. And as you can see on the first page of P1 at the bottom, I summarize the 3 different land use codes which are referenced in the applicant's traffic study. One being mid-rise residential with first floor commercial. That's an alleged existing use. Another being Land Use Code 851, convenience market, also an alleged existing use. And then 931, quality restaurant, the alleged proposed use. With regard to the middle, the convenience market, that was ascribed to a former delicatessen called the Haverford Market Deli and Sandwich Shop, which I understand has been closed for the better part of a decade. And according to an internet resource, which I uncovered as shown in the middle of page 1 of P1, was open generally about 8 hours per day, 6 days a week. If you turn to page 2 of P1, you'll see that I included some italicized excerpts of the written descriptions for these land use codes according to ITE. For the mid-rise residential, it's pretty straightforward. It says mid-rise residential with first floor commercial, mixed-use buildings having at least 3 floors and including retail space on the first level. So at first blush, that does seem to describe the prior use. The next category is convenience market. Again, these are just truncations of what's available. Some of the 10 pages of backup material that I referenced earlier are the full pages from the ITE document that give all the details of the different categories. But the takeaways here, the hallmarks of 851 is it's a market that's open between 15 and 24 hours per day, and they generally sell convenience foods, sometimes beer and wine. And the really interesting one here is 931, quality restaurant. It's kind of a curious nomenclature, as if there were non-quality restaurants, which of course there are not. But in any event, some of the takeaways that are important from this land use category is high quality, full service eating establishments, typical duration of stay of at least 1 hour. Quality restaurants generally do not serve breakfast. Some do not serve lunch, all serve dinner. This type of restaurant often requests and sometimes requires reservations and is generally not part of a chain. Patrons commonly wait to be seated, are served by a waiter or waitress, order from menus, and pay for meals after they eat. So taking that last category first, I was not present for the prior hearings, but I did view some of the YouTube material, and it seems to me that there might not be all of the elements that I just read into the record of the proposed restaurant. So I'm not sure if that is exactly the proper fit for what's proposed. But nevertheless, assuming for the moment that those qualifiers do apply, what I started to fill out on page 2 of P1 is a table which shows the weekday AM and PM peak hour trip generation according to ITE for the former use versus the proposed use, and then if there's any difference, if there's a negative difference, that would be argued as a benefit to the community. If there's a positive difference, that would mean additional trips and potentially, additional congestion. So we're starting off here talking about quality restaurants, since I just chose to work backwards. taking the middle land use next, as shown at the bottom of page 2, in my experience, this land use code is typically used for a different type of facility than what previously existed. I currently serve as the township traffic engineer in Cheltenham Township, Montgomery County, where there is currently pending a application for a Wawa on Easton Road. And the applicant in that case used this category for that Wawa. And if you turn to page 3 of P1, you'll see a picture of the former Haverford Market and the existing Wawa. This is the one on Route 202 in King of Prussia, which, as we all know, are sometimes open 24 hours and are very bustling enterprises. So it may have been an overstatement to try to categorize the Haverford Delicatessen and Sandwich Shop as Land Use Code 851, especially since the hours of operation are inconsistent with the definition according to ITE. So now let's turn to a moment to the first land use, the mid-rise with first floor commercial. So if you read this text on page 3 of P1, this seems to suggest that the trip generation proffered by this land use code includes both the residential and the commercial component of the building. And since it was potentially unclear, and since the applicant's traffic engineer chose to have a different interpretation, he included the apartment trip generation separately and the proposed Haverford Market as Land Use Code 851, the quote Wawa intense use. I reached out to Lisa Fontana, who was on staff at ITE and has been for decades, and has forgotten more about these land use categories than I'll probably ever learn. And asked her to confirm for me whether or not this this land use code includes the residential and the commercial component. And one of the backup pages for my report is a printout of the email exchange I had with her, where she did confirm that it does. So using Land Use Code 851 for the Haverford Market seems both to be superfluous, because it's already included in 231, and it also seems potentially inappropriate to use 851 for the reasons I gave. So if the board accepts that offering, then you can see at the top of page 4 of P1, I've now completed the previously incomplete trip generation summary, and what we're left with is a noticeable increase in traffic, particularly during the weekday PM peak hour. As I'm sure the board is aware, traffic engineers tend to focus on peak hours. All of our computer models are based on algorithms that are focused on hourly flows. This doesn't mean this is the only traffic this site will generate. There's obviously 22 other hours of a typical weekday where traffic will be generated, but this is the peak times. There is an alternative that potentially could have been more appropriate, that being Land Use Code 930 for the proposal. That's called a fast casual restaurant. In the interest of brevity, I won't read everything into the record, but you can see if you read the description on page 4 of P1, it seems like it might be a better fit. And that has an even more intense use. You'll see the alternative or alternate trip generation summary at the bottom of page 4 of P1. The trip generation gets even higher. So that sort of covers my thoughts on the applicant's traffic findings. Now, the applicant's report touched very briefly on parking, and I decided to look into that in somewhat greater detail because that also gave me some concern. I visited the site and noticed that the driveway along Haverford Road currently has what I'll call perpendicular parking on the left side as you enter. And there are currently tire stops delineating the potential parking that currently exists. There's 8 tire stops today. The last one, I'm not sure, is potentially a legal spot because you typically need to have some sort of turnaround or termination at the end of a parking aisle. And that last spot seems to go pretty close to the property line. So it's possible that there may only be 7 spots there. Although I'm thankful that I've been accepted as a traffic engineer, I typically do not prepare parking sketches or plans. I leave that in the good hands of my colleagues, site civil engineers, Rob Lambert, Chris Yan. But I've seen them enough to know that it's 8 at most and probably 7. So that leaves the driveway along Buck. And that driveway is also relatively narrow. And when I visited this week, there was one parallel parked car parallel to the property line there, and one angle parked car. And I feel very confident that the angled parking along that driveway will not meet code. There was barely enough space for me to get by, and it was a very small car that was parked on an angle. So
Did you stop and measure it, Frank, or are you just going by eyeball?
I did measure it, and it was about 9.5 feet from the corner of the parked car that was closest to me to the step of the building. And again, that car was a very small subcompact car that had its nose basically in the bushes and trees. If it was anything more substantial, it would have been certainly more challenging. I would be surprised, again, I'm not an expert here, but typically you need a minimum of 10 or 11 feet for a travel lane. And I think that's going to be challenging there. You could probably fit 2 parallel spaces in that area. So in my way of thinking, you probably have maybe 7, 8, maybe 9 parking spaces that you could fit on the site. So as you know, the code requires 2 spaces per apartment, so that's 4 for the apartments alone. And according to ITE, different reference material, the quality restaurant might generate as many parking spaces. The quality restaurant may require as many as 27 parking spaces for that use, although there's an alternative way you could look at the analysis that gives you a result of 19. Even using that lower number, that's for the restaurant use alone, for patrons and employees. So it would be my suggestion, since sometimes codes tend to lag the ITE data. Codes tend to be sometimes a bit older than the ITE data, which is always updated, that the township might consider using whatever is greater, either the ITE suggested number or the code number. But regardless, if you just focus on the code required apartment parking, the 2 existing, and as I understand it, are proposed to continue to exist, apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floor, you're only going to have about 4 or 5 parking spaces left for the restaurant, and you'll probably have 4 employees during times of peak shift anyway. So that would leave basically no parking for patrons, including the pickup activity for takeout orders. I understand that the applicant indicated there may be as many as 8 to 10 takeout orders alone per hour, seating for up to 17 persons, 4 employees. This just doesn't add up to me. This seems like it's going to be more parking than the site can handle. As the board is well aware, there is no on-street parking on Haverford, and there's very limited parking along Buck, and it's further removed from the site. So I have concerns that the site might be a little bit too intense for the parking that it can provide. And I would encourage that the applicant engage a professional to put together a parking plan rather than rely on just a simple sketch. So that's a summary of P1 and also a summary of my findings.
Frank, is it fair to say, sort of summarizing your testimony about the applicant's traffic study, that using the code convenience market overstates the number of trips that the Haverford market would have generated, in your opinion?
Yes, that's accurate.
And is it also your opinion that using the code quality restaurant understates the number of trips that you believe the proposed restaurant would generate?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. And instead of using and in fact, there has been nothing in that space since, we believe, 2012, according to minutes by the Board of Commissioners. Assuming that it's been vacant since 2012, none of these trip generations for a convenience market are occurring.
Yes, if the use has been closed for a decade, then there would be no traffic associated with that use for the last decade.
Or close to a decade.
Yes, close to a decade.
Okay. Okay. And then turning to the part of your study where you addressed parking, you mentioned if you turn in off Haverford Road that there are, I believe you said, 9 parking spaces on the left.
I think the applicant's sketch may have indicated 9. I counted 8 tire stops that exist today, one of which I think is probably not code compliant, so it could be as few as 7.
Would you agree that those spaces are shown on a property known as 705 Haverford Road, which is a separate parcel than 701 Haverford Road, which this application is concerned with?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
If you know, because, yeah, we're so far afoot from traffic. If you don't know,
That's my
You're
understanding,
not
as I
sure?
said,
Based on what?
Qualify, right?
based on conversations with council.
Based on the site plan that Mr. Kovacs, who was the previous owner, put in 2013, which are part of the applicant's exhibits. I can't tell you the number, but he did have a site plan and it's there. At that time, he was proposing a reverse subdivision of the 4 lots he owned to create 2 lots. And what it shows is there is 701 Haverford, which has the Haverford Market and the apartments on it, and a few parking spaces in the back. And then next to it, 705 Haverford, where a dwelling unit was demolished in approximately 1992. It was covered with impervious surface and has been used as parking, commercial parking to support the Haverford Market. It had been used as commercial parking to support the Haverford Market, but it is not accessory to the market. It is a separate lot, and it is zoned R6.
So I would say, Kelly, can you pull up the applicant exhibit with the plot plan? And do we know if the suggestion from council is factually accurate?
I think it's A5.
Which part specifically?
About whether the proposed parking spots perpendicular to Haverford Road is depicted on exhibit, I think A5, the plot plan or the site plan, whether that's as depicted there on the property, the subject property, or on the adjacent property.
I believe from the surveyed plans that were provided during the reverse subdivision when that had been withdrawn, it's been both. It looks like the parking area is partially, slightly on 701 and partially on quite a bit more on 705, but it does span both.
Okay. Given that the 8 or 9 parking spaces shown on the plan appear to correlate with a spot solely on 705 Haverford Road, would you agree, Mr. Tavani, that those spots are not accessory to 701 Haverford Road?
That would seem reasonable.
Is this traffic?
I can move on. Okay. In your opinion, as a traffic engineer, is it a good idea for a traffic engineer to visit the site in person before writing a report?
It certainly does no harm.
Thank you very much.
Before I ask the board if they have any questions, I'll ask Vincent. As a party, you have the opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Tavani now.
I just have one comment. I think before the second meeting, I handed in a revised copy of the driveway and the parking.
Is that this? Yes.
Yes, it is.
No. This is A5, right?
A5 was a site plan with the proposed parking configuration dated 4/29/2021. That plan appears to be dated May 4th, 2021, so I don't believe that was entered into the record as an exhibit.
Does anybody have the 429? Vincent, you heard Kelly's response to my question, right?
Yes.
What was marked as Exhibit A5 is a proposed or a site plan for parking dated 4/29/21. What I just showed you is a parking site plan dated 5/4/21.
Correct.
This has not been marked. I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask that we mark that if you like. It would be marked A10 if you'd like that to be part of the record. I'll mark, or actually, you can give it to Arlene, but we can't speak while she's marking it. But before we do, this is just a statement from you. This wasn't marked either. Did you want this in the record? Restaurant menu?
It was just something
It's up to you.
yeah, let's do it.
Take this from you, Bill?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's going to be 10, 11. This, right? Is this a photo or a rendering? Want that in too? Now ask Arlene to mark all three of these. 10, 11, and 12. Okay.
I have so many papers.
We need copies for. We're off the record, but Vincent, I just want to ask if you have do you have extra copies of those with you by any chance? Those three items?
I'm not sure about the parking, but about the other one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no extra copy of this in there.
I do not have one of those, no.
Okay. Pam? Hey, Pam, do you want to look at these before they go in and see if you have an objection? It's 10, 11, and 12. Sure.
Okay.
Can you tell me who prepared this document for you?
My wife.
Can you tell me what your wife does to qualify her to draw a site plan?
Space planner, interior designer.
Hold on.
Sorry. She's a space planner and interior designer.
This is slightly different than the first site plan you put in.
Correct.
And originally, you had some angled parking here directly behind the Haverford Market building and sort of adjacent to Buck Lane. And now you have 3 parallel parking spaces?
We did.
Okay, how did you arrive at the dimensions, the figures, like 25 between the spot and the rear of the structure?
Well, I'm assuming we measured. Each car needs 18 feet by 9 feet. I'm sorry. Each car needs 9 feet wide, or 18 feet long by 9 feet wide. And then I'm assuming the cars were parked. She took the measurement from the fence to the car, and then from the car over to the building.
Does this drawing depict parking spaces, particularly 9, 10, 11, and 12, in places where there's currently impervious surface, or does some of it go onto areas where there's currently grass or something other than impervious surface?
It goes right up to a fence. I didn't notice much grass there, just
Well,
shrubbery.
yeah, I was really just showing them to you, see if you object to their admission. You know, he's going to testify to them, and then if you want to ask him questions, that's fine. So do you have any objection to these being admitted?
No, I don't.
Okay, so A10 is a parking site plan dated 5/4/21. A11 is 3-page menu. A12 is this a photograph or a render?
That's a rendering.
So a rendering of the parking lot and the building. So we're all these exhibits admitted. Yes, I think so. Just in case. A1 through A12 have been identified, marked, and they'll be admitted into the record, but, so, okay. The originals? Well, it's like the only copies. Right. People want to look at it. You guys want to look at these? You have it? Or do you want to see it? So, Vincent, do you have any questions that you wanted to ask of Mr. Tavani?
No questions. The thing is, if we bring another traffic study in the next meeting, that's going to change also. As long as we keep bringing traffic studies in, and they're just going to keep changing. Everybody's going to have a different opinion of what to do and what not to do. Also, on the parking, on the first parking plot we put in, we had the cars parked on an angle. Then we realized if they were parked parallel, it would be easier to get in and out. That was the reason for the second drawing. That's all I have. Oh, also one thing. The gentleman was saying employee will be parking in the lot. The employees will not be parking in the lot. There is on-street parking across the street behind the gas station. And we should have 3 or 4, probably 2 full-time employees, 2 part-time employees. So no employees will be parking in the lot at all.
All right, now to the board. Jess, do you have any questions for Mr. Tavani?
I do not.
Ed?
No other questions.
Jesse?
No questions. Thanks.
Bill?
Mr. Tefani, we asked a similar series of questions, and I won't belabor it, to the other traffic consultant on the first report, but it would seem to me that none of these LUCs are, clearly applicable to this property. I haven't yet seen in either report,
You can have.
yours or theirs, an LUC that talks about a project of this size with second floor apartment or apartments. And I just want you to confirm that, or tell me that one of these is a very accurate portrayal of this property.
So the ITE trip generation manual is now in its 10th edition, and it's like a 4-volume set. The books collectively are probably almost 2 feet wide. But it does, as you correctly state, it does not include a land use code that fits every conceivable. And curiously, land use code 231, mid-rise residential with first floor commercial, is probably the best fit. But it includes the commercial activity is the difference. He's essentially double dipped by including 231 and 851. And in my experience, 851 is really for a much more intense convenience market. This was not a convenience market in my estimation, it was a delicatessen. And there is no delicatessen land use code. So ironically, I think probably the applicant's traffic study probably does contain accurate trip generation information for the former use if you leave out 851, in which case what's proposed is definitely more intense than what previously existed. Now, the best thing to do, and what ITE recommends you do, if you do have this odd duct that doesn't fit very well, is you conduct your own data collection at your site. And in this case, having been shuttered for the better part of a decade, it simply can't be done. And that sort of underscores the issue as well. You know, it's been closed a long time, so why are we even considering it, I guess, is one way I'm looking at it.
Right, and the other question I think that we asked the other consultant was, you did not, I think you said you did not you visited the site, but you did not take any existing traffic counts, left turns, right turns from Haverford Road at any time, whether peak or non-peak or anything like that.
I did not collect traffic count data, correct.
And then what do you consider in this case to be the peak hour? Or have you made an assessment that that's like an evening hour, or is that, because it's a restaurant, is that more like 6 to 7 would be in the evening peak hour? Or I know we have several different categories in these tables, AM peak hour, PM peak hour. What are those hours? What are the peak hours?
So the definition typically is some 60-minute period beginning at 7 a.m. and ending at 9 a.m. for the AM peak. So it could be 7 to 8, 7:15 to 8:15, 7:30 to 8:30, et cetera, or 4 to 6 p.m. in the afternoon. So as you can imagine, for something like a Wawa, the AM peak hour can be quite intense, you know, people getting coffee and things of that nature. And for any sort of restaurant, you know, it might be closer to the tail end of that 2-hour window from 4 to 6, but it's probably still relatively well captured. Now, if you're intimating that it's possible that a restaurant might have continued peak activity later than 6 p.m., that certainly is possible. And interestingly, the underlying or existing traffic volume will begin to drop at that time. So the impact of a use generating more traffic later in the day is amplified. You know, the denominator becomes lower because the existing traffic tapers off. So as the numerator grows, you have a greater percentage, you have a greater impact in terms of a percentage growth on that underlying road. So taken to an extreme, if you have 10 trips at 9 o'clock at night existing, and you have a use that adds 100 trips, then you've just increased traffic on that street by an order of magnitude.
But that's a purely relative analysis.
Yes,
Okay, thanks.
you're welcome.
Thanks, Frank. Who do you want to call next, Kim?
I'd like to call Kevin Murphy as my next witness.
Okay.
We have brought him here as an expert real estate broker.
Kevin,
Good evening, everybody.
please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Your full name and the capacity in which you appear this evening?
So my name is Kevin Murphy, and I'm here as a real estate broker.
You want to go through a voir dire with Pam, and then Mr. Malone will ask our usual questions.
Mr. Murphy, can you please tell us, you told us your name, can you give us your business address?
Sure. My business is Mainline Executive Realty. We're located at 801 Old Lancaster Road, Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, 19010.
What is your profession and your professional certifications or accreditations?
So I'm a real estate broker. I'm a broker in Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts, and Maryland. And I've been doing this for 28 years.
Are you familiar with 701 Haverford Road and the Brynford area in general?
I am. It's a few blocks from my office. I know the past manager of the property, and I know the gentleman that sold the building, yes.
Have you ever testified before a zoning hearing board before?
I have.
Can you tell us where you've testified?
I was an expert witness for Lower Merion Township for a property or two that they've sold. I've testified for zoning hearings in Philadelphia for and against developers.
Okay. I would like to offer Mr. Murphy as an expert real estate broker, both commercial and residential.
Bill?
Mr. Murphy, when you hear counsel indicate that she wants to admit you as an expert, as a real estate expert or real estate broker, what does that mean to you?
It means to me that.
I was asking the witness the
Oh,
question.
I'm so
Sure.
sorry.
So, I'm sorry. So, to me, they asked me to testify as an expert based on, I've been doing almost 30 years of commercial leasing and sales, residential leasing and sales, and I have a team of about 25 agents that work under me. So I'm pretty familiar with not only this area, but also the vicinity and most of the main line.
So it would be mostly marketing and sales in which you would hold yourself out as an expert?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you hold yourself out as an expert in the field of real estate appraisal?
Not appraisal, although brokers are allowed to give estimate of value, but I'm not here for appraisal purposes.
Okay, so are you here to testify as to the valuation of any of the properties?
No, not to the valuation, more or less to the highest and best use, and also to the quiet enjoyment of the neighborhood.
Okay, when you talk about the quiet enjoyment of the neighborhood, how does that factor in to your proposed area of expertise?
Okay, great question. So not only am I a real estate broker, but in my credentials, I've been president of Ardmore Business Association for 10 years. I was secretary of Ardmore Business District Authority, now Ardmore Initiative. I was president of Marion Civic Association. I was president of the Federation of Civic Associations of Lower Marion and Narberth, and I have done similar type of hearings for civic associations and community associations along the main line and in Philadelphia.
Mr. Kane, I would suggest that Mr. Murphy is qualified to testify as an expert in accordance with what he indicated regarding sales and marketing of the properties. To the extent that we can enter the appraisal values, I certainly do not believe that there would be expertise in that regard. And then finally, with regard to the last set of questions or last set of answers as to being part of a civic association and whether or not that provides an expertise in any other area, I'm not sure that that's been established.
Okay. Any questions from the board or comments? That will accept Mr. Murphy as an expert in the previously stated fields I need to regurgitate.
Fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, were you asked to conduct research about factual issues regarding whether 701 Haverford Road has ever been listed for sale, as well as your professional opinion relative to the application for a use variance for a restaurant?
Yes, I was, Pam.
Okay. Did you conduct that research and take a look at the site?
I did.
Okay. Can you please tell me what you found?
Okay, so in residential real estate, the primary research tool used for comparables and sales is Bright, formerly Trend MLS, Multiple Listing Service. So I went back and looked in the Multiple Listing Service to see any activity in the residential market for this property. And the last thing that I saw was the sale back in 2014. There was no listing for sale, there was no listing for lease.
Is that either residential or commercial?
So that's just the residential aspect. In the commercial market, we're also members of CoStar, and CoStar's sister company is LoopNet, which is a predominantly used multiple listing service for commercial brokers. I went into CoStar and into LoopNet, typed in the address 701 Haverford Avenue, Haverford Road, and nothing came up. So there was no recent listing in years for this subject property in CoStar or LoopNet.
Okay. Was there any listing in CoStar or LoopNet since March 2014?
No.
Okay. What is the zoning district for 701 and 705 Haverford Road?
So that is R6 medium density.
What uses are permitted in the R6 zoning district?
So, single-family homes, there's also, I have it here, if you want me to refer to it, I could pull it up, but R6 is medium density. It permits single-family, semi-detached dwellings, also R1 zoning permits. It allows everything in R1, which is low density, which includes single-family, railway and bus passenger, telephone offices, electric substations, daycare of not more than 2 children.
Are there also conditional uses in the R6 district, assuming permission is granted?
There are conditional uses for duplexes, triplexes, and quadruplexes.
Okay. Is a restaurant a permitted use in the R6 district?
Restaurant is not permitted in R6.
Is a commercial parking lot a permitted use in the R6 district?
A commercial parking lot is not permitted in R6.
Okay. In your professional opinion, is there any reason why the property, meaning 701 Haverford Road, cannot be developed in conformity with the R6 district?
So,
Hey, Pam, I hate to interrupt you. Does our code have a specific designation for a commercial parking lot as opposed to?
No, it does not.
Okay. That's what I just asked Bill. I said, oh,
okay.
something
Sorry,
I
I'm
didn't
getting
know.
ahead of myself.
Okay. So I believe what your question is, what can be done at this property, which is you could develop as a residence, as residential uses.
Okay. In your opinion, what's the highest and best use of this property?
I think residential use is probably the best way of developing this right now.
Okay. Can you tell us about the demand for residential uses in Brynford and for this property and for the area around this property?
So I just went into the multiple listing service and I pulled up a market study for the past 28 days. And there are 75 properties that are listed or that have been sold in the last 28 days in Haverford Township. 64 of those 75 properties sold within 45 days.
How
So
would you characterize?
64 of 75, that's a strong demand and very little supply, a lot of demand.
In your professional opinion, is a gas station across the street an impediment to residential development on 701 Haverford Road?
I don't believe so, and I'll base that on properties, the Exxon station in Ardmore. I know it's Lower Merion Township, but there are developments that have been built both sides of Montgomery Avenue nearby, and they're just disappearing instantly. So based on that, and also right by Heilman Sunoco off of Lancaster Avenue on Wyoming, one property off of the corner, they were up and gone in no time at all.
And when you say that the residences have been disappearing instantly, do you mean that they are being sold quickly?
They are, Pam.
Despite being in very close proximity to a gas station?
They are,
We'll get to that. Yeah.
they are, and yes.
Okay. Is there a property in close proximity to this gas station which recently sold?
Yeah, right across the street on the corner, the property just sold. I believe it went for $440,000 in June of 2021.
That was 701 Buck Lane?
That was 701 Buckley. Yes, I'm sorry.
And that is diagonally across the street from this gas station?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts about, in your opinion, about the suitability of a restaurant for this location?
Well, I think a restaurant in this location would cause a detriment to the neighborhood. And I could base this on, and keeping examples in Haverford Township, Moroni's on County Line Road. It's a place where people can dine in and they could pick up and eat and take out. And people park anywhere in the middle of the road. They'll block a driveway, they'll put their blinkers on, they run in, they run out, but they don't care about blocking someone's driveway, and they'll say, oh, it'll just be 2 minutes. When you're on your way to the kids' soccer game or something, and you have to wait for somebody to move their car because somebody's too important to find a real spot, and they say, wait 2 minutes, it raises the ire in the neighborhood.
So how does that correlate to the subject property?
Well,
given its location?
so I tried to think of a location that I'm familiar with in my experience. So this is Ardmore as opposed to Haverford, but I'm just saying it's a restaurant with takeout and the neighborhood, the parking, and relying on the neighborhood for parking to pick up.
It's a residential neighborhood.
It is, yes, ma'am.
Now, you've heard Mr. Tavani testify
I
on
have.
behalf of the Brynford Neighbors Group. And after hearing his testimony, do you have an opinion about whether a restaurant use at 701 Haverford Road will affect the public health, safety, and welfare of residents in the adjoining residential properties?
Well, the things that would be impacted would be light. You'd have more light around the business. You'd have signage. You'd have noise. You'd have odors. And you'd have trash. I remember, and I know from other restaurants, nobody likes to keep the trash inside the restaurant. At the end of the night, it would be brought outside. You'd have odors. You'd have recyclables being dumped after hours. So these are all noises and smells and odors that you don't want to have in your neighborhood, especially a calm little neighborhood like Brynford.
Do you have a professional opinion about whether a restaurant use at 701 Haverford will affect the use of neighboring properties, particularly things like street parking, just their use of their front yards in general?
Well,
Things like that.
right now, if you go down Buck Lane, there's very limited parking. As you go a half a block down from the subject property, there's a stop sign. And it's really not a necessary stop sign, but I think it was put in there to keep people from cutting through really fast and to keep it calm and tranquil. And I do think that the traffic generated by a restaurant and the in and out from takeout orders and employees or patrons going up and down the street could negatively negatively impact the area there, yes.
And lastly, in your expert real estate broker opinion, can you tell us whether a restaurant use at 701 Haverford Road will affect the value of neighboring properties?
I've seen the property values go down when they're located around restaurants, especially restaurants with liquor licenses. The nuisance factor, and I don't know if there's a liquor license involved here.
I don't believe
It
so.
wasn't brought up.
I don't think that's
But
an issue.
I bring it up as, the nuisance factor of the noise, the traffic generated in odd hours after closing. You have people getting sick outside and urinating, different things that are really unpleasant in neighborhoods. So
Okay.
it does detract from the values, yes.
Are some of those things associated with bars?
Yes.
So,
And would you say this is worse than a gas station?
Would I say it's worse
Worse
than a
than a
gas
gas-
station? Probably, yes.
Okay.
'Cause the hours of the gas station are pretty much set. The restaurant can fluctuate.
So what exactly is worse about this than a gas station? Is that assuming that they were selling liquor? Because there's no their testimony is actually that they're not selling
Well,
liquor.
I say that the difference is really the close proximity. The gas station is across Haverford Avenue, so you're across a four-lane road. So you're 40 feet plus away from it. The noises generated are not carrying over past the traffic counts as much as, the noises from the bottles and the trash being dumped after the restaurant's closed. The odors, the gases, you're not smelling the gas, you will smell from the Ansel system and the ducts in the restaurant. So that would be within really close proximity, just like, let's put a paint booth there. If you want to talk about something that's going up and smelling, you're going to have the fumes from the restaurant going up just like a paint booth. And since it's so close, the gas station is, as I said, 50 feet away. So that's the difference I see. And you're asking me to shoot from the hip, so these are
I just
the
wanted to
quick responses I
understand,
have.
how you were making that comparison.
Yeah,
I
sure.
don't think the comparison between a gas station or this use is all that probative about this use. It's a completely separate, different parcel, different
Right.
use and all that.
if I could follow up with a question. Kevin, you told us about whether a restaurant with a liquor license would affect the value of neighboring properties. What about a restaurant serving lunch and dinner, and also with 15 to 17 tables inside, which anticipates doing 8 to 10 takeout orders an hour. Would a restaurant like that, without a liquor license, affect the value of neighboring properties in a medium density neighborhood like Brentford?
Well, let's break this down. You say 17 patrons can dine at once. So what's that, 4 or 5 cars? Maybe more. You have 8 to 10 pickups an hour. So that's another 8 to 10 cars. So the lot will be able to handle, if I heard correctly, 8, maybe 9 cars. So you're going to have overflow, and there's going to be a need for more parking. Well, there's only limited parking on Buck. They're not parking on Haverford Road. I don't foresee these people going and parking where the employees would be parking behind the gas station. So it's really going to be people dropping their cars on Buck Lane in front of these houses, and that will be, that will be a problem. Yeah, I think that would be.
The value of that neighborhood
I think that
houses.
would impact them, yes.
And impact them in terms of making them less
Traffic,
valuable.
correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just have a question for you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So you testified that Moroni's was a similar situation to this restaurant. Does Moroni's have a dedicated parking lot?
Moroni's has a few spots back behind them. If you go past the back of their restaurant on, not County Line, the side street, I can't remember the name.
Neither can I.
It's
Yeah, this is bad that we don't have.
Is it
Biddle.
Biddle. Thank you.
No, we can't go back and forth. Go ahead, Jeff. Wait, no, Jessica has the floor. Go ahead, Jessica.
So in your opinion, this restaurant would be a slightly different condition from Moroni's because people could double park in the parking lot versus in front of somebody's driveway?
Well, using Moroni's as an example, my office 12 years ago was next door. And I can't tell you the number of times I couldn't get out of my driveway because of the cars. And they're just like, it just drives you really crazy fast.
But Moroni's.
But again,
lot-
Moroni's had no parking lot
No,
besides
they have a parking lot just. to
3
use up.
spaces.
Correct.
Thank you.
I'll riff off that. I've been trying to rack my brain in the last few weeks about what a similar existing establishment, and you mentioned Moroni, so further down County Line Road at the corner on Wynwood, are you familiar with Sesame?
I am, yes.
Would you say that maybe Sesame is a little bit closer to what is proposed here, as far as it has residential, it has a small parking lot on site, and it's
So-
on a corner at a major intersection?
Yeah, that's a nice example, but that one is in Lower Merion Township, not Haverford Township, so that's why I ruled it out. But it does have pull-up parking in the front, and it has a parking lot in the back. So it has, the ability to pull up and pick up and take out easily, and the dine-in patrons would easily be able to park and walk around. So it's a little bit different. The number of parking spots there at Sesame, it's probably 8 to 9 parking spots in the back and probably 2 in the front.
Okay, but that's similar to what we've seen proposed, right?
Okay.
And I mean, as
That
far as
was-
I can think of in the area, that's
Yeah.
an establishment that seems to be very similar, and they haven't been open for in-person dining
Right.
yet, but I believe they plan to have, a small number of seats inside, so.
When it was the J&G Deli and when Chris's was there, it was used basically and Chris Pakitas was a client of mine. It was basically used for the pull-up parking in the front, and that was where the pickup or the takeout was done, and most of the patrons sitting in were parking in the back parking lot.
Yeah, that's probably another reason I thought of it as, it's because it used to be a small deli as
Right,
well.
the
So
deli,
it's actually
very similar to
since-
this market, correct.
I have nothing further.
So Sesame struck you as maybe a poor fit as a comp because it's in a different, a poor fit because, as a comparable, because it's in a different jurisdiction.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a similar thing in Haverford Township when
Understood. But you testified that we should look at 2 gas stations, or 2 residences that are within close proximity of gas stations that are in Lower Merion Township.
I couldn't
And
think
so-
of any other gas stations that are around that had development, and
But you thought that's probative for us, for this,
Right.
for that argument, but it's not probative, that Sesame's not probative.
no,
Or-
I just said I brought it up because it was Haverford Township. I didn't rule it out. I think it's a great example, but it's just in a different township. If the next, let's see, we have a gas station down where the Exxon is at Eagle Road, but there's, to my knowledge, I can't think of any development that's right there, but if there were, I would have brought it up as a cited example.
Ed?
No question.
Jess, you have anything else? Mar? Okay, I have nothing. Pam, you said you have additional questions?
Yes, I'm sorry, I thought of two additional questions, and I apologize. Kevin, first of all, is it correct that the reason we asked you to give an opinion about a gas station across the street is because there has been previous testimony in this case about the gas station being a deterrent to anyone wanting to develop 701 Haverford Road?
Well, I could see why that was mentioned, but I don't think it's it's not proper. It doesn't hold water.
In your opinion? Okay.
In my opinion, it does not.
The next question I have for you is, in your experience, if someone wishes to sell or lease their property with a commercial use, is it customary to hire a listing agent to list the property on a commercial or residential real estate website such as Bright MLS, CoStar, LoopNet, things like that?
It would probably be the best way to market it, correct?
Okay. How often does, in your opinion, how often have you come across a property which was not listed with a broker and found a tenant or a buyer nonetheless?
I'd say it does happen, Pam, if you have signage up there on a high-traffic street, but I haven't seen any signage, and I pass by that property daily. It could also happen if you have it on a Zillow or something like that, but Zillow's not a tool used by the real estate industry for the most part. I mean, like, we don't market on Zillow the way we do with the multiple listing service, CoStar, LoopNet.
In terms of percentages, how often do property owners use a listing agent and a listing service versus, let's call it the equivalent of commercial for sale by owner?
I would have to
Don't
guess.
guess. You
I
don't-
would have to
just say you
guesstimate
don't.
95% or 90, I'd say 90% or more.
Use a listing agent?
Use a broker to list the property.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Viola, do you have a question?
Sure.
If you were going to build homes in that area where the market is now, townhomes, would they be, what kind of homes? Single family?
Well, you would probably not fit many multifamily, so I would go with townhomes.
How
yes.
many do you think?
Not my,
So Kev, you
Well-
want to step over here? So you guys aren't on top of each other?
Oh.
And just speak up a little so Arlene could hear you. You're a big guy, so I'm sure you could speak loud and Arlene could get down your
so
testimony.
I'm not a developer. I would have to have a site plan done and see what would fit and what goes in according to the code.
Okay, so for each townhome there, or whatever you put in there, you need 2 cars for every home, correct? So,
Again, I'm not a developer. I'll go with what you're saying.
so if you put 8 in there, you need parking spots for 16 cars. That's a lot of cars in and out all day long. Yes?
So, but it is a permitted use, and it's also low or medium density. The garages could be in the back and go in and out, not on Haverford, but on Buck. And it would be 8 cars going in and out, as opposed to 8 cars going in and out all day, as opposed to 8 cars going in and out an hour while the restaurant is open.
Well, if it's 2 cars per home and there's 8 homes, that's 16 cars going in and out all day. And that's just 2 cars allowed.
I'm just trying to make you so that.
If everyone has another adult in the house, I could have more cars going in and out.
Okay, well, I think this might be more of a question for our traffic study person.
Moroni's. I live right 2 blocks from Moroni's. Moroni's has a parking lot in the back, and it's not 3 cars. It's at least double that, if not more. I've never been in front of Moroni's where I've seen anyone double park because of the parking there.
Okay. Next door was my office. It was Mainline Executive Management.
Okay.
And we were there for 10 years. And I'd say every night there would be at least 2 cars parked behind the pull-up parking and/or blocking the driveway.
So
It's
the
a-
purpose of this is you ask him questions, Vincent, and then he answers the questions, not to argue back and forth.
Okay.
That's more of a,
You mentioned that a restaurant that would have an oil smell and things like this, and an odor smell, a garbage smell. But then you said a gas station would not smell. I've been past many gas stations and pumping gas, and there's a constant smell of gas and oil all day long.
So from where you're talking about, the gas station is 50 feet from from the corner property. And it's even further to the houses on Buck. So you're talking at least 80 feet. That smell is not going more than 80 feet. From where you are to the first residence are maybe 30 feet.
Okay, but it does
You're
smell.
docked, okay. I'm not gonna argue with you.
Well,
If you could smell it, that's great. It was a question that I'm not here to address smells.
And we're using cooking oil. We're not using anything toxic. Another thing, you were talking about the stop sign at right in the middle of the block. If you have children, that is definitely something you need there. You said you thought it was unnecessary.
No,
it's irrelevant.
I'm saying,
Next question.
Okay. And you also, I think Pam mentioned we will have 15 to 17 tables. I think she meant to say 15 to 20 seats, not tables. Tables will be way too many. And I did say at the beginning, maybe 8 to 10 takeout per hour, but this is just a guess. If all chefs and restaurant owners knew what they were going to do ahead of time, we would never go out of business. So, and I think that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you.
turn your mic.
Any other questions for Kevin?
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute recess.
Good timing.
Off the record.
Back on the record? We are back on.
All right, we'll reconvene the meeting of the Haverford Township Zoning Hearing Board. Pam?
Yes, you asked me to let you know when Lauren Cabanas arrived.
Yes.
She is one of the people who put in for party status on her own behalf, and she is here now.
We're-
Lauren, can you come up?
No. No. Please step up to the podium. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
And your full name and address for the record, please?
Lauren Cabanas, 701 Buck Lane, Haverford, Pennsylvania, 19041.
How do you spell your last name, Lauren?
Cabanas.
And it's my understanding you submitted a written request to the township for party status, which has not yet been ruled on by this board. So I would ask, is it your desire to withdraw that request and merge your party status request into the group that's represented by Pam?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as I'm heard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pam.
If we're,
You have another witness you want to call?
would you like to go next? Sure. And then we'll
Whatever
do
you want
Kelly
from me.
quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you've already been sworn.
Yeah,
so
there we
that
go. I'm already here.
won't pay any, right? Go ahead.
Lauren, would you please repeat your address?
701 Buck Lane, Haverford, Pennsylvania, 19041.
How long have you lived at this address?
Less than 30 days.
Is it correct to say that 701 Buck Lane is on the corner of Buck Lane and Haverford Road?
Yes.
Is it diagonally across the street from a gas station?
Yes.
Is it directly across Buck Lane from the vacant Haverford Market with rental apartments on the second floor?
Yes.
With rental apartments on the second floor. Can you tell us what led to your decision to purchase a home in this location?
We have lived in Pennsylvania for 6.5 years, and we rented for our first 6.5 years here in Lower Merion, and our house was very tall and not wide, and my husband is disabled, so it was literally 3 stories to get to our bedroom. So in this home, because it is so wide the way it's built, there's one set of stairs. So my husband has a restroom on the main floor and is going up 9 stairs to get to our bedroom instead of 25 stairs. And, it's just the way the layout was, and it's hard to find. I'm from Florida, so ranch homes are just normal, but here they're very hard to find.
Does your home also have a bathroom on the first floor?
It does.
Was that hard to find?
Extremely hard to find.
Okay.
Our rental for 6.5 years did not have that.
So is it fair to say that despite some drawbacks, you purchased this home because it's difficult to find a house with a floor plan that meets your husband's needs?
Absolutely.
When you were looking for houses to buy, did you ever see a listing through your agent for 701 Haverford Road?
No.
Okay, since moving in less than 30 days ago, can you tell us how you learned about the application for a variance?
We had settled. 2 days after settlement, there was a knock on our door from one of our neighbors inviting us to a meeting, and that's how I found out about it. So we weren't moved in, and we had just settled that Monday, and that Wednesday there was a knock on my door, and it was a little notice that said, please join us for a meeting.
Okay.
And that's when I found out.
So now that you know about the application for a use variance for a restaurant directly across the street, can you tell us what your concerns are about that?
Just by living in the house for as long as we have, I don't have little children. So my concern was not being on a corner. My concern was not Haverford Road or a sidewalk even. My concern was I have adult children, so it's a 4-car ability. And the road is very small, so whoever has to kind of go to work, my husband doesn't work, but whoever has to go to work first really parks on the street, and then the rest of us. And there's not even enough room for that for us to get in and out. I mean, when we have to move cars, it takes us 45 minutes just to move 3 cars because there's traffic and there's a lot going on. There's also a lot going on in that parking lot all the time, and my bedroom and my bathroom and my front yard faces that property. I mean, I look at that property. And when we came and looked at it, we saw that the market was there, and I did say, oh, that's interesting. And they said that it hadn't been a market for years and years and years. Like it hadn't been anything for years, and we're residential, and that was it. Nothing was disclosed to me about anything else.
You were reassured it was a residential neighborhood?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. So how will this change if a restaurant use opens up across the street?
For me, there's a lot of things, I think just listening to the Ansel system, listening to the garbage being picked up at random times and the cars, and I was listening before, it's not just 8 or 10 pickups, it's the different kind of Grubhubs and deliveries, and that it's not just people picking up, it's the companies that do it also, and we can't even get on our street as it is. It's a very small, I literally can touch that property from my front yard. So for me, even if I were to put up a fence and barricade myself in, it is something that is just the noise level, the lights into my bedroom. We have blinds, but into my bedroom where we sleep. There's so many different reasons. Which is the reason why I live in a residential neighborhood. So I'm struggling with that.
So since you've moved in, have you ever seen commercial activity on the first floor of 701?
No.
Do you think a restaurant at 701 Haverford Road will affect the value of your property?
It already has, without a doubt.
What do you mean by that?
So my property that we bought was on the market for a very long time. I think there were many factors for it, never knowing about this particular factor. Because this isn't a private forum, it's a public forum, and it's widely known in the area and where I live on our streets, and even, other people. It's already lost its value because this is happening, and I've not even been there a month. I haven't made my first mortgage payment, and I want to move out. I want to get rid of that house and never even think that this is going to happen again. And so it's already affecting everything about our whole lives and the value of our house.
So the public being aware of this
Absolutely.
zoning hearing board series of hearings has disseminated throughout the community.
Absolutely.
And you think it has affected the value of your house?
Without a doubt.
If the use variance is granted, what do you think will happen to the value of your house when a restaurant opens up across the street?
It will definitely go down. It would be a nightmare to live there. So no one's going to want to live there, including myself at this moment. And it's not there yet. So There will be no way to sell that house.
So you paid $440,000 for your house. Would you have paid that amount if there was an active restaurant use across the street?
No, I wouldn't have even bought a house that had commercial, right? We knew the gas station, we knew it's across Haverford Road, but that's across Haverford Road. We're on the residential side, but no, definitely not.
Is there anything else you would like to say to the zoning hearing board?
I would just please have you hear me that I am a direct hit for this variance if it goes through, that my house is the direct hit. I'm 701 Buck, they're 701 Haverford. I mean, we share, like, literally from you to me is how far they are from my front door. And so I can't even believe that this is happening, actually. And we have only been here for 30 days or so. And I implore you to really think hard about this, because it's affecting us and it affects us the most. And we're right there in the middle of it. And I'm living in a nightmare at this point. And all I wanted to do was find something where my husband would be able to get up, down, around. And,
Did you tell me earlier you feel like if their property value goes up with a commercial use, yours goes down?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, it's without a doubt, yes. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Wait,
Okay.
Vincent, you have questions? For Lauren?
Hi, how are you?
Lauren, you could step over to that microphone right there.
Thank you.
You bought your property, but you knew that corner across the street was, to be nice, it's a disaster. That corner is really... So you think if a working restaurant was there, and I don't know if you've seen the drawings or the renderings of the restaurant. Have you?
Not
Okay.
there in that location.
Right.
No. But I did see the vacant location, and my husband and I discussed it. And because it was vacant and it wasn't an active commercial property, we felt that, okay, it's maybe an eyesore technically, but it's not active, and so it's not going to inhibit us from driving on our street or getting out of our driveway. I mean, we can't get out of our driveway now, so I can imagine if it was active, I wouldn't have moved.
Correct. So you think if there was a quaint cafe across the street, you think it would have deterred you from buying
Absolutely.
the property?
Especially in this day and age where you have to put tables outside and COVID rules or, post-COVID rules. However, the noise factor from Haverford Road is a noise factor, right? We factored that in when we were looking at the house. We were the fools that bought the house after it was on the market for 170 days. That's what happened, because we had no idea this was an issue. If we would have known, we wouldn't have.
You brought up Grubhub and delivery services. I have stated before we will not use
I've
any
never been
deliveries.
to anything before, so I did not know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. We would not use that in any way, shape, or form. That's it. That's all I have.
Any questions from the board? Bessie?
What was your closing date on your house?
6/21,
6/21?
2021, yes, 6/21/21, sorry,
Okay, and so you were not aware of the April 29th meeting where this was first?
was not.
No other questions?
Bill?
You said that you had bought the house and been on the market for a while, and I think I just heard you say something like it had been on the market for 170 days. Do you know why you think it took that long?
What my realtor told us, and the seller realtor said, was due to COVID, the people in the home, there was job loss, but they couldn't be specific, obviously, because we don't know them and they're strangers. And they had moved out of the state, and they had moved out of the state months and months in 2020. So the house had been vacant. They lowered the price, and I think there was a sale, and then the sale fell through. And then a couple months later, we came in and made an offer on the house.
So, by the way, you have a driveway.
We do have,
Correct?
yes, absolutely.
And how many cars do you?
We have 4.
4 cars. And how many drivers live in the house?
There are 4 drivers in my house. Yes, and it is actually, when we bought it, it's stated as a 4 car driveway.
4-car deep driveway.
Exactly. Yes, that's what it is.
But you still use the street. Is that right?
When we have to move cars, because let's say my son has to get somewhere, Yeah, he will go on the street if he has to. If he goes in the last one on the row, if someone's not home yet, then my husband's the only one that's always home, but the rest of us, come and go to work. So his hours are not like 9 to 5 kind of hours. So if he doesn't make it into the inside and I have to leave at 7 in the morning, it's a whole movement of cars, which is fine, except it's already hard to do that on our street.
And when you were conducting your diligence on this house, you said you were aware there was a gas station diagonally across the street.
Yes.
There's a commercial establishment directly across Haverford Road from you. And did you think that this property, the subject property here, would not be returned to commercial
I did
use?
think that because and again, my realtor, I don't know what they knew or didn't know, but she did say this is residential, because we did ask about it, because it's not pretty, it's a little corner spot, but it's not pretty there. And I did notice that people lived upstairs because their groceries got delivered to our house one day, like since we've lived there. And we just brought them over because we knew they weren't ours and whatever. There's a lot of activity that goes on with that apartment. There's cars in and out of that parking lot. So we've seen it. However, our realtors, it was, continually said, this is residential. It will never open again because it's been closed since 2000 something. And it's zoned residential, and that made total sense to me because it is on the residential side of Haverford Road, technically, so that, it was important to me, but I did ask about it. But I never imagined that it would be something that would become active because I was told that it's residential and that's what it's zoned for, so.
Okay, thank you.
Ed?
No other question.
Jessica?
No other questions.
As do I. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Ma'am?
Okay, moving right ahead, I would like to call Kelly Kirk as a witness.
No? Do you want to sit there, or do you want to? You can sit there.
I was gonna say, I've got a microphone here.
Okay, please raise your right hand. Go. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, Kelly, just for the record, could you tell us what your position is at Haverford Township?
Sure. I am the zoning officer for Haverford Township. I also do community development.
Okay. What is the zoning category of 705 Haverford Road?
It is zoned R6.
Okay. When was the zoning code enacted in Haverford Township?
The very first zoning code or the current zoning
The
code?
current zoning
The
code.
current zoning code was enacted in 1974.
Were you asked to search Haverford Township's official records for documents regarding Haverford Road?
I was.
Okay. Specifically, were you asked to search for building permits, zoning relief, use and occupancy certificates, non-conforming use registrations, business licenses, and rental licenses?
I was.
Okay. And did you find anything when you completed your search?
I found very many documents for that property in particular because that record request was related to 701, 705, and I believe,
7-Eleven?
thank you, the property on Buck Lane. For 705 particularly, there was about 4 documents in the file.
Okay. And I have provided those documents, and they are marked Exhibit
P3.
P3.
Yeah.
Could you take a look at them and just tell us what you found?
I can. Quickly, just before we get to that, I don't know that P2 was marked, if you want to go back and do that really quick.
Oh, that was supposed to be Kevin's report. I'm sorry. So P1 was Frank Devani's report, P2 was Kevin Murphy's report, and P3 is the results of the search for Haverford Township records for 705 Haverford Road. Okay.
Wait, what? Hold on. So do we have the originals for the file?
I do.
Mark?
No, I have not. They haven't had them marked.
Mark them.
They're not. Well, they were pre-marked by the app.
I think
And,
that
and
one I
now, when you say a records request, so I have a stack of unmarked documents that you submitted. Which of these pages now do I mark P3?
Okay. Okay, hopefully you have a sheet there marked Exhibit 3, but if not, the first one is Department of Code Enforcement Housing License. The second one is Department of Codes Enforcement, Haverford Township, application for a license to lease or rent. The third one is a letter dated July 17th, 1992, to Mr. Thomas Richetti from Charles T. Held. And the last one is a card containing an index. It has Mr. Thomas Richetti's name on it, and it refers to 705 Haverford Road.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Ms. Kirk, are these 4 documents the complete results of your search?
For 705 Haverford Road, yes.
Yes, okay. And it's correct that all of these documents that you found refer to residential use of the property?
They do, yes.
Okay. And the last document contains a notation that the house was demolished?
Correct.
And would you infer that because the last rental license on there is 91 to 92, would you, is it fair to say the house was probably demolished after 91 to 92?
I would say that it's quite likely that the house was demolished very soon after the 1992 license expired, which would have been February 28th of 1992. Our system for data entry of permits began around 93. So there was no record of the data entry of the demolition of that house. So it gives it a very, very small time frame of when that was done.
Okay, so it establishes a window when that could have happened. Okay. And so then just to go through it again, like you searched the records and you did not find any records for zoning relief to change the use to a commercial use at 705 Haverford Road.
Correct.
And when you conducted your search, you did not find any building permits for 705 Haverford Road.
Correct.
When you conducted your search, you did not find a use and occupancy certificate for 705 Haverford Road.
With the exception of the previous housing license.
Right, so the use and occupancy certificate, that's required when you sell a property in Haverford Township?
For the transfer, no.
Right. And that includes the transfer in 2014?
My office does not handle those licenses or those applications or transfers. I had produced all of the documents that I was able to have access to for that record request because the person who does that in code enforcement was on vacation, and I was understanding of the fact that there was a very small time frame of when those documents were needed. So I produced anything that I was able to produce, but it's not to say that those things don't exist, just not within my access.
Okay.
That record request is still pending with code enforcement, I believe, until the 29th. There was a 30-day extension.
Okay. If I told you that I filed a right-to-know request for any use and occupancy certificate issued for 705 Haverford Road, and I got a response by email from 2 women, one was named Joanne, I'm sorry, I can't remember her last name, and another woman, I think her name was Regina Cugini. Would you object to me saying that, or would you disagree if I said that they responded to my right-to-know request and said they had no use and occupancy certificate for 705 Haverford Road?
I'm unaware of any sort of conversation that may have happened after Joanne Earhart in code enforcement, who does process their record requests, after she returned and I had produced what records I had of theirs.
Okay. Does 705 Haverford Road appear on a list of non-conforming uses, a non-conforming use registration kept by Haverford Township?
It does not.
And no business licenses were found for 705 Haverford Road?
No certificate of occupancy for businesses was found. I am aware that there is a record request for business licenses for tax purposes, but that would be through the finance department and not something that I would be involved with.
Okay. pending the results of that search, would you agree with me as zoning officer that any ministerial acts by a taxing authority are not binding on a zoning authority?
Correct.
Thank you. I have no further questions for Ms. Cook.
Vincent, do you have any questions for Kelly? Bill?
No.
Jess? Jess?
Just one quick question, Kelly. Are certificates of occupancies typically issued for parking lots?
I have never seen one, no.
Okay, thank you.
Ed?
And no other question was mine.
And Kel, you said something about records not necessarily being available prior to digitization of the record-keeping system. When did that go into effect?
That was probably early, maybe, I'd say around the first or second quarter of 1993.
Is that all you have, Ellen?
Is it correct that you have two use and occupancy forms in Haverford Township? One is for residential, one is commercial.
They're listed that way. That's not entirely accurate. It's just it seems to be helpful when people are searching for those forms, but not entirely accurate. The one form is for the transfer of a property. The other form is for commercial occupancy of a property.
Isn't it correct that both forms contain the word not only for structures but also for vacant land?
It does, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, don't believe the commercial occupancy, use and occupancy application has that, but I can't say that I have that form completely memorized off the top of my head.
Okay.
Is that it? Any other
Yes.
questions? You're done, Pam?
Yep.
Thank you. All right,
Next.
next.
I'd like to call Hetzi McCullough as a witness. Sweetie.
Hello.
Hello?
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
And your full name and address for the record, please?
My name is H-E-P-S-E-Y. H-E-P-S-E-Y. M-C-C-A-L-L-A. Epsy McCullough.
And what's your address, Hepsi?
702 Buck Lane.
Ms. McCullough, how long have you lived at 702 Buck Lane?
I live at 702 Buck Lane since 1998, 89.
89.
Do you own the house?
Yes,
Can you tell us about your house? What kind of house is it?
I have a twin house.
Do you,
Uh,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do you have a driveway and off-street parking?
No, I park on the street.
How many cars do you have?
I have one car, and the first, I had two cars. One was total. It was parked in the middle of the night. I was in bed, and somebody hit my car and hit my neighbor's car and totaled both of them.
When did that occur?
In 2019, December.
Do you have central air conditioning in your home?
No, so I have to keep my windows open when it's real hot.
Do you keep your windows open in your bedroom?
Yes,
Are you employed?
yes.
What do you do for a living?
I work at Roxborough Memorial Hospital.
Can you tell us what your schedule is like? When do you go to bed and when do you wake up?
Well, I go to bed between 8:30 at night, and I woke up by, I have to get up by 4:45 because I have to be at work by 6:30.
And, okay. Do you have any sort of informal arrangement with your neighbors as far as the parking space in front of your house?
No, because our neighbors, they respect our, in front of our house, so I always have a parking. So if somebody comes and park, they know I'm coming home, so they will move. Or maybe just a visitor, so I don't have no problem.
Okay. When you moved into your house back in 1989, January 1990, you had told me?
Yes.
Haverford Market was still operating, wasn't it?
I don't know if it was operating because Bill always come, must be early in the morning, and by the time I get home, he's already gone. So
And you get home at what time?
sometime I get home like 4:30.
So Haverford Market was closed before
Yes,
4 or 4:30?
Yes.
Okay. Were there a lot of cars
No.
visiting Haverford Market?
No.
Okay.
I didn't even know it was a market when I just moved there because it was no lot of cars. And before I lived there, we checked the neighborhood to see what it's like because I used to live in Balakinwood before we got that house. So we drove around in the evening to see what the neighborhood is like before we bought the house. And it was so quiet and nice. And everybody was nice. Everybody keep their yard real nice. So I figured that was the place.
By the way, who do you currently live with?
Right now, I was living with my mother and but she died.
So it's just you now? Okay. Okay. So have you heard about the request for a variance to put a restaurant in 701 Haverford Road?
Only one afternoon, I think it's that gentleman, the only one time I saw him, and he came and knocked on the door, and I answered the door, and he showed me an envelope and said that his menu in it, that he's going to open a restaurant. I said, where? And he said at the corner, and I said, I don't think this is a good place for a restaurant. This is a residential area. So, and that was it.
Okay. And by the way, is your house separated from the Haverford Market by one other house?
Yes, there's a little house that belongs to the same owner of Haverford Market.
Okay. So you're not directly adjacent to the property that Haverford Market's on, but just one house away?
Yeah, but my window, I can see everything and hear everything. The lights and all them thing I can see and I can hear.
Okay. And so are you concerned, because you sleep with your windows open and you live there?
The noise, and I have to wake up early in the morning.
Okay.
I have to go to bed early, and I have to wake up early because I have to be at Roxborough by 6:30.
Okay. And are you concerned about the parking spaces on the street, the availability of parking spaces changing?
I'm just afraid that when I leave early in the morning and then I come home, I'm not going to have no parking.
How old are you, Ms. McCullough?
I'm 70.
What is traffic on Buck Lane like now?
Well, in the morning, because of the school up the road, 2 schools up there, Haverford School and Haverford School and Friends. In the morning, it's kind of busy because people coming from Coopertown, going up to Lancaster, and then in the evening. But after 4 o'clock, everything settled down. You would even know that people driving on the road.
And you mentioned that in 2019, both your car and your neighbor's car were parked on the block and were totaled
Yes.
by a moving car. Did anything happen after that to your neighbor's car?
Yeah. In December of 2019, her car got totaled and my car got totaled. So we both got 2 new cars. And this year, I think it's May, her car got totaled again.
Second time her car was totaled.
Second time. And the first time it got totaled, it was in the night. And the second time it got totaled, it was in the daytime.
And was it a parked car when it was totaled both times?
Both times.
Okay, so these are not 2 moving vehicles getting into an accident?
No.
This is just
Because
traffic on the street?
I was in my bed when my car got totaled.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to say to the zoning hearing board about the request for a variance for a restaurant at 701
No,
Haverford
I
Road?
would not want a restaurant right there. My bedroom is right there, the noise, the traffic, the lights, and all of, no, I don't think I could do it.
Thank you.
I would have to move.
Mr. Viola, do you have a question?
All the people I talked to since I've been doing this, and I've walked from Millbrook all the way up to Polo, Ms. McCall was the nicest no I got when I asked her if she would sign. Just a nice lady. And but I did want to ask, and not so much for Ms. McCall, but to the board themselves, the signatures that the Brentford Association got and I got, how much bearing do they actually have on the board and their final decision?
Which signatures are you talking about?
Pro-variance, anti-variance.
Where are they?
There was a, I think,
Petition?
yeah, Mr. Fellow, you're talking about the stack of clipped letters that we got.
Correct.
That, correct me if I'm wrong, whether it was going to be entered in or not. We entered them in. We did, okay. So, yeah. Yeah, that's different. Kelly's got it here. This is a stack of letters that are kind of a mix.
Correct.
Oh, they're all yours. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. And we got other letters, I guess, that have been part of the record that are mixed. Okay.
Sorry, for
I
clarification.
suppose, well, we're not really going to answer that question because it varies on a case-by-case basis. But we're always sensitive to the neighbors' concerns. But it's an impossible question to ask how much weight's given to.
Okay.
to-
If I could read an email that I got from Miss Rosalind Spiegel,
13.
if you guys don't mind.
Wait, what did you say? I'm sorry, I was looking at your letters. What did you
It's okay.
say, Vincent?
I said I'd like to read an email, if
She's
that's
objecting.
possible.
Okay, I got
She
it. Who's
objected.
the email? Before we hear the objection, I'd like to hear who the email's from.
It's
So who's
from-
the email?
It's from Miss Rosalind Spiegel.
And so what's the basis for your objection?
Relevancy at this point, this is cross-examination.
I'm sorry.
She's right. So we're in the middle of Mrs. McCall's testimony. So it's not the right time for you to make that suggestion. Is there some other basis that you're going to?
No, of course, Mr. Viola should put it in at the appropriate time. There's no objection to the substance, only.
So after they're done calling all their witnesses, then I'll give you an opportunity to present.
And the only reason I asked was because we were talking about the signing of the variance form. So I'm sorry if there was it wasn't appropriate.
All right, any questions from the board?
I have a question.
Bill? No. Ed? Jessica?
I just have a question about your work schedule. Are you consistently Monday to Friday, or do your days vary?
Monday to Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Start work 6:30 in the morning.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay. Go ahead, Pam. Thank you.
Okay, for my next witness, I would like to call Chris, whose last name I can't remember, Chris Morse. Thank you. I'm going to swear you in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And your full name and address for the record, please?
Christopher Morse, M-O-R-S-E, like Morse code. Address is 710 Buck Lane.
What was your address again, Chris?
710 Buck.
Okay, go ahead, Pam.
Okay. Mr. Morse, who resides with you at 710 Buck Lane?
It's myself, my wife Molly, my 2-year-old daughter Alma, and my wife is pregnant. We have another on the way due January.
Can you tell us about your house, what are its characteristics, and tell us about your property?
Sure, it's an old twin. I liked it. It was built in 1860. It attracted me when I bought it. There is no driveway, only the on-street parking, and we are 4 houses down from 71 Haverford, on the same side of the street.
How many cars do you have?
1 car.
Do you have any logistical issues with parking now?
Yeah, I would say there are, even without a restaurant or really anything happening at this site, there are already parking problems. It's not every time, but it's not infrequently that I need to go much further down Buck Lane or go on to Haydock, the street that is perpendicular to Buck Lane, in order to find parking. That creates logistical problems for me when I have, a child, I'm trying to get out of the car, groceries and barking dog and everything, carrying them down the block. So, those sort of logistical problems come up when there's a shortage of parking.
Do you have any safety concerns related to parking your car now?
Yes, even right now I do. Every morning my daughter goes to daycare. I put her in the car seat in the back, and depending on which way the car is facing when it's parked, often I am standing in the middle of the street trying to get her into the car seat. I kind of joke, it's the most dangerous part of my day, just trying to get her in there during rush hour traffic, either in the morning or in the afternoon, as there are kind of 2 lanes of traffic trying to go past me on what really is like kind of a space for 1 lane of road. Buck Lane has the parking lane and it has 2 lanes, but it's a very old and narrow road. And I haven't measured it, but it would probably be about the width of like a normal modern size road at this point for a 1 lane.
Does Buck Lane have 2 lanes of moving traffic in opposite directions as well as 1 parking lane?
Correct, yes.
If there's a parked car at the curb and you have 2 moving cars approaching each other, can they go past each other or do they do something else?
If they are very small cars, if you have 2 tiny little Priuses or something, they can go past each other. Anything larger than that and just kind of duck and weave is what most of the traffic will be doing on Buck Lane.
So someone
Mr.
pulls
Kane,
over, let someone
Mr.
go
Kane.
through.
Exactly.
Mr. Kane, if I could interrupt for 1 second.
Yes,
Just as a point of clarity, Mr. Morse, you testified at the first hearing, correct?
I had submitted an email at the first hearing. I didn't testify orally.
Okay, but you presented, some statements, at least in
Yeah.
written form on your behalf. So Pam, I'd like you to limit this testimony to things that were not addressed already. We're trying to avoid redundancy here for the record.
Yes, yes, if I bring something up that's already been covered, I apologize. I'm trying to focus it on new material. Do you have,
If I could just say too, to that point, there was a very terse email that I wrote before I knew really anything about this. This was sort of like this proposal to change this zoning was a surprise to, I think, the entire neighborhood. And I've learned so much more since that process has begun that even to some of those statements, my opinion may have evolved since then.
do you have any safety concerns about walking on Buck Lane?
Yes, I do. The section of Buck Lane that's south of Railroad, I walk that with my daughter to Preston Park every evening. That's not too bad. There's a sidewalk on one side of the street for that section. There are other places I would like to go on Buck Lane. There's the Friends School that has a good playground. There's a Quaker Trail that leads to Haverford College. That's all north of Railroad, where there is no sidewalk, really no shoulders for most of it, and traffic that can sometimes go very fast, particularly depending on the time of day. I don't travel that section when my daughter's with me. I know a lot of people, I still see people who often will be walking along there. When I drive that, I go like 10 miles an hour and you're still weaving, avoiding the people who are walking along that section of Buck Lane. That is a frightening section to me for pedestrians right now.
So the sidewalks are not continuous as you move up the block toward the Friends School?
Correct. They end almost immediately once you get north of Railroad.
Are you able to walk in the right of way there up on the side of the road, up on the property at the side of the road?
No, there's really no shoulder. There's like a ditch for a lot of it, and it's not easy to do that. That's why most people are walking like 2 or 3 abreast, actually on the road itself in that section.
Are there encroachments in the right of way?
I'm sorry, encroachments?
Things like trees and shrubs and walls and boulders.
If you were to jump up on other people's property and be walking there, yes, at parts there would be.
Okay. So you have no choice but to walk in the street at that segment of Buck Road?
Right.
Okay. Have you observed traffic volume on Buck Lane?
Yes, I work at the Wharton School. We've been working remotely for the past 15 months, so my kind of home office is the front bedroom. I sit right by the window overlooking traffic every day, 9 to 5 for the last 15 months, so it's been in my head, my little unofficial traffic study. I've seen 2 accidents live in person over the past 15 months that I've sat there. In the 3 years that I've lived at 710 Buck Lane, my parked car has been hit twice. As Hepsia testified, Johanna's car has been totaled twice while being parked. So again, that talks to the kind of speed that cars are traveling here to hit a parked car and total it.
Maybe.
Possibly. I can also hear very often the screeching of tires. I kind of brace. Half the time you hear a crash, half the time you don't. A lot of these are going to be down at the intersection of Haverford and Buck. I'd just say too, a lot of the accidents that I did mention have happened kind of midway, or I guess mid-block, not actually at the intersection of Haverford and Buck. I don't know that those accidents that I'm mentioning would have been included in any accident data that would have been pulled for that intersection for Haverford and Buck.
So meaning mid-block accidents are not reflected in data for accidents down at the intersection as far as you know?
My understanding.
Okay, and what's it like living near the private schools with regard to traffic volume?
I like the private schools, but as I think it was Hepsi was saying, there are definitely peak volumes where there can be traffic problems from this. There's a big problem actually on the most northern end of Buck, right before you get to Lancaster. Actually, on the weekends, there's kind of game day at Haverford School for football or lacrosse. All the parents park along there. It's a narrower section of Buck Lane, and so when you're parking there, it's just room for one way. So it kind of creates this one way, really just one lane chute for about 100 yards, where there kind of cars queuing in either end, waiting to kind of duck through to try and pass. You actually see cars backing up on Lancaster trying to turn onto Buck that can't because of that situation. So that's one example. There's a lot of 16 and 17-year-old drivers from Haverford School who have their own cars. We'll go through there very quickly. So those are my concerns there.
Having heard our traffic engineer, Frank Tavani, testify this evening about and present his traffic report, do you have any additional concerns?
I wouldn't say additional concerns so much as the fears that I've developed following this process feel more kind of confirmed. And really the two main ones being that it's going to make this residential street more dangerous than it is, and it's going to make parking much more difficult for the residents than it already is.
Is there anything that you'd like to tell the zoning board about whether a use variance, in your opinion, for a restaurant should be granted to 701 Haverford Road?
Sure. I guess I want to say that I'm not anti-progress. I understand there's value in mixed-use development. I was in Philadelphia for 10 years before I moved here in that kind of environment, and I get that. But I also moved out of Philadelphia for a reason. I was looking for a place where I could park in front of my house and not have to walk multiple blocks, and that had a more residential feel. So I think in this case, this is more of a big ask that would have both short-term impacts in terms of the traffic and parking and the lights and noise and pollution, and a more long-term impact as well in terms of the kind of characteristics of the neighborhood. So that's kind of my general feeling on there being I guess variances of this sort. In this particular case as well, my understanding is that Brentford already has one of the highest concentrations of non-conforming allowances in the township. Again, my understanding was that part of the planning commission's plan was that these non-conforming allowances would eventually die out. And honestly, it seems like this is what is happening in this case. This has been not in use for the last 9 years. And it seems logical to me that it's following the path of dying out as opposed to be giving new life and then elevated again. I would ask that it seems to me that any change, if we're going to be making it, should be done strategically with input from the planning commission and from the neighborhood and everything else, as opposed to done in a more piecemeal way for a specific person's zoning request, which could potentially have more kind of domino effects later for, again, the character of the neighborhood. The last thing, again, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know this, but I get the sense from what I've been told and read that unnecessary hardship would need to be shown for a variance in this case, and I've sat in both these meetings, and I just haven't heard that yet. So for those reasons, I would be opposed to 701 having this variance change.
Thank you.
Mr. Viola? Question? Jess? Bill?
You owned a car when you bought your house?
Mm-hmm.
You bought a house knowing that you didn't have a garage or a driveway and you were gonna be relegated to street parking?
Yeah, it's interesting, actually, when we first went to buy the house, that was one of my big red flags. And I drove by there multiple times checking, what's the parking like today? What's the parking like today? Sometimes it wasn't great, but you could always, find parking. It wasn't that bad. I didn't notice until much later, not much later, but until after I had signed the offer sheet, that the Haverford Deli was there. But it was vacant, there was parking there. I wasn't too concerned by it. So that's still my concern.
And you realize that it's public parking on the street? You have no possessory interest?
Oh yeah, of course, which is the problem, right?
Right. And has the parking gotten worse since you've moved in?
I think it's been pretty steady. It can sometimes vary depending on which neighbors move in. Some houses are for rent, and some people have more or less guests or have more or less cars in the household, but generally pretty stable.
And how long have you been at the house?
A little over 3 years.
Okay, so you were there pre-COVID, and so you just testified that it's been pretty consistent even during COVID.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Ed?
No other question.
Jess? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Pam.
I'd like to call Cecilia Johnson Dunlop as a witness.
After her. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
And your full name and address for the record, please?
I am Dr. Cecilia Johnson Dunlap. I live at 760 Buck Lane.
Wait a minute, that's a lot to write. What's your address again?
760 Buck Lane.
760. And what would you, go ahead.
Dr. Dunlop, how long have you resided at 760 Buck Lane?
For 23 years.
Do you own the property?
In 1998, my mother bought the property, and it is in a irrevocable trust for me, and I am the sole beneficiary.
Has your mother since passed away?
Yes, she has.
Okay, and are you in the process of taking full title to the property in your name?
Yes, I am.
Do you intend to stay?
Yes.
Okay. Who do you reside with?
With my son and my husband.
What is your professional background?
I am a psychiatrist by training.
Off the record, business must be good since COVID. I couldn't resist, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Would you please tell us about your house?
My house is actually a duplex, a single dwelling, a duplex, but we have been for at least the past 18 years, just living in it as a single family home. My son is 17, and since he was born, we have no longer rented out the upstairs.
Does your house have off-street parking?
Yes, we have a garage and off-street parking that is accessed off of Railroad. However, if our driveway was to be accessed off of Buck Lane, we would never be able to have parking because there's never any parking on Buck Lane. And I'm not sure if everyone, well, I do think the last person that testified gave a pretty good picture of how narrow Buck Lane is. There's not a lot of room for traffic and there is a lot of traffic on Buck Lane. So, you know, you have one lane of parked cars, and you have 2 lanes of traffic, and there are always cars parked on Buck Lane. I used to be able to sometimes stop in front of my house and drop groceries off. Now I can't ever do that. Doesn't matter what time.
What happens when visitors come to your house in a car?
They cannot park in front of my house. If they can get a parking space on Railroad, they're lucky. But usually what I have to have them do is pile into the alley, the access way behind the house off of Railroad.
Okay. You've since heard that there's an application for a use variance for a restaurant at 701 Haverford Road. What are your thoughts about that?
I am not in favor of changing the variance for the property at 701 Haverford Road. I would not like to see any additional traffic on Buck Lane. I would not like to see anything other than residential traffic in my community. I think that the applicant for the variance has shown that there's not has no hardship or really any concern for the community. I walk often and have been doing a lot of walking during the pandemic, and trying to walk around the properties that the applicant currently owns is almost impossible.
Why is that?
I took pictures on Tuesday on my walk.
We've submitted them as E4.
Let's do that. So there are a series of 2, 3. You want to identify them, Pam? How many photos?
Wait 1 second.
And you want to mark them collectively as P4?
Yes, please. Would you like it that way, or would you like it broken down?
You could mark them collectively.
Why don't we do P4, A, B, C, D?
Okay, but there's more than 4, right?
Okay.
There's more than 5. Yep.
Okay, so I have 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
Can we mark them P4, A, B, C, D, E?
Yes. Now, Pam, I'm going to just review this.
Okay.
This is
A.
So that's
P4A.
A. C.
C.
D. E.
And E. Sure.
Wait. That's F?
That's F.
Is there an F?
Yeah, that can be, that's F.
Oh, there is an F. Yes.
That's F.
Thank you.
That was a nice way of trying to.
It's late. Okay. Okay.
So, yeah, this is what I look at, trying to take a walk in our nice, quaint, quiet neighborhood. Walk down Buck Lane, and at the end of the street is Haverford Road. And so A is Haverford Road and Haverford Market, which just recently, since Mr. Viola has taken an interest in opening this restaurant, has recently gotten spruced up, because
Speaking
that,
of Mr. Vile, Did you get a copy of these exhibits?
I did not.
Anybody have an?
Oh, this pile here, yes, I did, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
I brought 10 copies.
Okay. Because that didn't look so well landscaped a few months ago. So now that looks nicely landscaped and it's not a problem. However, as you can see, I'm having very much of a problem if I want to walk past it. And that, this is A. Across the driveway, I can't walk on the sidewalk there.
Do you know whose property that is? Is that an extension of this property?
That is the applicant's property. And I was even more appalled when I found out that someone lives there.
There are 3 properties in a row, 701 Haverford Road, 705 Haverford Road, which has, there's no structure, and then 711 Haverford Road, which has a structure and heavy vegetation.
So that's 7-Eleven behind all of that stuff. Vegetation, thank you. Or foliage. And then B is what it looks like after I, negotiated the traffic and walked into Haverford Road and got around all of the vegetation and then took another picture. So you can't actually see that there are actually structures back there, but there, I believe, is 7-Eleven and 713 behind the vegetation because this wrought iron fence is at 715
Indicating the left side of the photo.
on B. I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted because this is the applicant's property, and this is the same person that came to our community meeting and said, I care about the community. How can you care about my community and this is your property? If I left my property looking like this, I'm sure I would have had some kind of notice from you guys or something. I don't know. But it definitely doesn't look like you
Well,
care
someone called
about
the township.
community.
They might, our job is only to administer these hearings.
Okay. So,
Board members don't work at the township building, we have full-time jobs and do this at night for the pleasure of it,
oh gosh, it's fun too, right?
which at 11 o'clock we have to call it. That's when the building goes
I
in.
want to thank you for staying this long.
Thank you for
The
your
last zoning
service.
hearing I was at, they
I'm
said.
going until 12:30,
1 hour.
where they put the automatic locks on. But once the door's locked, we're not an open meeting anymore, so that's a problem. Yeah. We will comply with the Sunshine Act.
Oh, I never thought of that angle.
So C is another picture of the front of 7-Eleven, 713. And D is the front, again, that I couldn't get past and had to walk out into Haverford Road. E is actually the back of 7-Eleven. And the alleyway where I would assume a dumpster would go for the restaurant, which the back of the homes that are on Preston Avenue share their driveways with. So, yeah, that's just what it looks like.
So knowing that there's an application for a restaurant use, a variance to have a restaurant use at 701 Haverford Road, what are your concerns in light of the photos you shared with us?
My concerns would be that if the applicant takes care of her property, rental property in this fashion, I would seriously be concerned of how a restaurant under her care or under her ownership would actually be cared for. And as far as my community is concerned, I would be extremely concerned about my property value going down to nothing and my community being trashed, essentially. If you have a dumpster, you have garbage. If you have garbage, you have vermin. And I don't want pests running down the alleyway or the back of my house. I don't want that in my backyard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
They're going to ask me questions.
Okay.
Mr. Viola, do you have any questions?
Is 760 Buck, that's above Railroad going towards Lancaster?
No, it's below railroad.
It's below, okay. I wasn't
Doctor,
sure.
you can come speak into this microphone. Trying to keep some distance.
And thank you for noticing that I've been taking care of the property there. I've been, just to let the community know and to let Ms. Hall know that I was interested in the building and the area. I've been cutting that and taking care of it since March. So just something to throw out there. The dumpster would not be put on the property next door. The dumpster would be the smallest one allowed, and that would go right in the back dock and area there. There's a cement docking area in the back of the store. It would go right there, and it would be covered with a shed. Something I would bring up. And Ms. Hall would have nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the restaurant, except where she would be the owner of the property. She would have no say in management or hours or how it's taken care of. That would be all on me. I will go in there and I will. The inside is going to be gutted, and it'll be a brand new building inside. I can't speak for her other properties. I know 711 Haverford Road does not have anyone living in there. That's an eyesore. And that's all I got to say.
Jess?
No questions.
Good?
No questions.
Ed?
No question.
Jessica?
No questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last witness I'm going to call. He has testified before, but we have a little bit of new material, and it's going to be brief. Josh Dupuis, please.
I swore you earlier, and I think you were sworn at the last hearing anyway, Josh.
Yes.
So you're still under oath.
Okay. Josh, can you just remind us where you live?
I live at 762 Buck Lane, so before East Railroad on the same block, but at the top of the street. I've lived there since February 2018. It's my wife. I have 2 kids, a son turning 3 in November and a daughter turning 1 in August. We had 2 cars. We now have 1 car. Didn't need the second car during coronavirus. We have no driveway. We park on the street.
Have you looked into property records for your neighborhood?
I did, so doing more research into this. So I counted the houses on Buck Lane. There were 18 houses on the odd number side and 24 houses on the even number side. That's not counting the church, which has multiple lots that it came into ownership at different dates, and it's not necessarily residents. So for the purposes of home residences, I counted 42. I looked on the Delaware County property records. Ms. Hall purchased her 4 properties in March of 2014. I counted 13 properties that have been sold since 2014 and 4 properties that were also contingent. Some may have even gone through or are still contingent. So that's a total of 17. I have the address numbers, but they'll just be listing a lot of numbers. That's 17 out of 42 homes that have changed ownership in the time since Ms. Dana Hall purchased the properties. That's just over 40% of residences have lived on that street not knowing a commercial use on this block. So when we talk about a significant change to the neighborhood, now change in ownership may not mean a change of residence. It may be going from an estate to an individual, but it could be up to 40% of those households do not know it as a resident, as a block with a commercial use on it. It could also even be more since the market hasn't been used since 2012, I believe we said, rather than 2014. So I thought that was an extremely relevant piece of data, that the neighborhood does not know that as a commercial use. And I would echo what people have said before, that yes, there is a gas station, there's a frame shop, down the street there's a brake shop, but there's a psychological divide as well that a road provides, that commercial starts there, residential starts here. And there is not commercial space on this block since 2012. So those residents who have purchased into it know it as a residential space. And I am also a believer that there may be this, there may be that, but that doesn't mean we make it worse. And I don't know how the board is thinking, but this goes to speak towards spot zoning. Are we saying, well, there's a gas station, so why not this? And then if there's a restaurant, well, why not zone the property up on Buck Lane to make it a bigger restaurant? So I'm wondering if some of the discussions about the gas station, about the other commercial, is impacting this restaurant, which to me would be an argument against the restaurant, because it's that spot zoning increasing into our residential area, which right now, again, 40% of residents have never known that block, up to 40% of residents have not known that block as having a commercial use. And I think that's significant.
Does the turnover rate of 40% or approximately 40%, even if you take away like interfamily transfers, does that show strong demand for residential properties on Buck Lane?
I absolutely think so. Again, I know the house at 701 Buck Lane, which we said sold for $440,000, I believe was sold in 2017 for $400,000. It's a 10% increase in 4 years. Now that does not match the increase in other areas. It is slower. It is not as ideal as maybe towards the top of the block. But it's hard to argue with demand. If there's a demand for residential housing in our district, because we have great schools and we have 4 properties, this one in particular, zoned for residential, why are we not making it residential? That is the demand. I am sure there are more profitable uses for that land. If you zoned it nuclear waste site, you could probably charge some really great rent, but that doesn't mean you make it that. You could make it a restaurant and make a ton of money, but that doesn't mean you get to do that because it's a residential space. And is there demand for that residential space? Absolutely.
Okay. Josh, have you been involved in a neighborhood effort for traffic calming?
Yeah.
For a neighborhood effort to calm traffic?
Yes, so I'd like to bring up, I know there has been so much discussion about traffic, and I'd just like to summarize it with, I know you guys aren't the traffic police or you're not traffic engineers, but the point is, what is the current state of traffic and what is the future state of traffic? If there is no traffic on the street, then there is capacity for more traffic. If there is too much traffic on the street, then adding a business that attracts traffic, you're going from overcapacity to even more than that. And that's what we've been trying to state.
When did you start doing that?
So so I submitted these, and this is going to be another document confusion. But there's an email titled Slowing Traffic and another email titled Brentford Traffic Calming. So I submitted this today into evidence because I wanted to point out that.
And wait, are the dates of those before this application for a variance was submitted and before we started the hearings? In other words, have people been discussing this long before the application for variance was filed? Okay.
So the first email is Slowing Traffic dated December 28th, 2020. That's
So are you gonna have these marked?
Yes, please. P5. Thank you.
So which is P5?
Slowing traffic. P6 would be Brentford traffic calming.
Got that, Cal? Go ahead.
So the date of slowing traffic is December 28th, 2020. That is an email between my wife at 762 Buck Lane and a resident on East Railroad, Eric Hartman. He took it upon himself to reach out to many, many local neighbors to discuss the issue of traffic prior to this restaurant, which I think is very important because this isn't a bunch of residents all of a sudden getting mad about just coming to complain about traffic, right? We were discussing traffic prior to this. We mentioned that it was a concern prior to adding an entity that adds more traffic. The email, January 29th, 2021, shows significant steps that Eric took engaging neighbors to try to find solutions. I didn't include on the list of emails of everybody that was on it because I didn't want to ask for permission from all those people, but it was 50 email addresses. So there was 50 people, including Eric who sent the email, engaged in a discussion on traffic in the Brentford area and concerns about the current state of traffic.
Since December 2020 or earlier?
Since at least December 28th, 2020, when my wife found out about it as an initiative.
Okay. Josh, you've given us a lot of data and a lot of numbers. Can you tell us your educational background and profession?
I work in finance. I have my undergrad degree in psychology and my MBA from Penn State.
That is all I have.
Viola?
Wait, they're going to ask you questions.
You can go over here, yeah.
The common theme on everyone who has spoken today who lives on Buck Lane has been no parking, no walking.
I'm sorry, Mr. Viola, do you have a question for me or a comment?
I'm getting there.
I'll manage the hearing.
There's no parking, no walking. The traffic is too fast. What actually drew you to move to Buck Lane if you knew these things?
I'm sorry.
He said, he asked, what drew you to move to Buck Lane if to those conditions?
There's been extremely hot real estate market for several years now. I moved to Buck Lane for schools and for the neighborhood feeling, which at the bottom of the street, there's the gas station, there is the frame shop, there is a busy road, but you go into that knowing what you're getting. And I didn't have a voice to say, well, the gas station at the bottom of the street, maybe not the best. But I have a voice here today, and I can point out to this board that their code states that their intent is to reduce non-conforming uses and to limit variances that may negatively impact the community. So that's why I'm here, because what I bought into is what I want to stay there, and what these emails prove is I want it to be even better. And unfortunately, that effort's been detracted because I'm trying to fight something that goes against that.
We had a conversation before. I think when we were walking around the neighborhood, you were kind enough to answer the door and talk to me. I asked you what you thought would go down there, would be great for that area, and you said a framing store. So you would want something there. It doesn't have to be necessarily be housing.
Do you have proof of what I said during that conversation?
All you say is, I didn't say that, and then we're
I
going to
didn't say that. There is a framing store across the street.
Okay.
My point being, it's zoned R6. It is able to be used by R6.
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bill?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, you talked a lot about, and I know you're fully aware of the traffic issues. Do you disagree with Ms. McCullough's testimony on traffic after 4 o'clock?
Could you remind me?
Her testimony, I believe, was essentially that after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there's not really a traffic problem.
I walk mostly at 4 o'clock, I usually am at the playground. I walk back at 5 o'clock. I do see many cars go through the stop sign that may roll halfway through the stop there are cars that speed through occasionally at 5 o'clock. From 5 o'clock I'm usually not out after 5 o'clock doing dinner and bedtime with my kids.
Okay, and in some of the emails that you submitted as, in P6, it seemed to me that part of this is a speeding issue, that you guys are witnessing and have spoken to representatives from the township about enforcing the speed limits and looking at that. In the afternoons, is the issue really one of speeding and stopping at stop signs, or is it overwhelming traffic, which I understand we've heard evidence and testimony about that in the morning, particularly because you've got two schools that draw traffic from the Coopertown area up through there. Is the testimony seemed to be from Mr. Kalla that it's different in the afternoon? Is that your experience?
I couldn't speak to exact. I would say that I don't appreciate the traffic in the afternoon either. And I wouldn't appreciate putting in a restaurant at dinner time either to have cars speeding down there. Mr. Viola spoke earlier about DoorDash, Grubhub. They can list your restaurant without your approval. And if we're talking about more cars flying down the street, trying to make time to deliver food, again, if it's bad in the morning, if it's not great in the afternoon, why would we look to make a residential zone worse and have delivery drivers bombing down the street looking to make pickups or make a more complicated intersection at the bottom? I can tell you that on weekends, when this restaurant would maybe do its best business, I sometimes walk across Haverford Road onto the other side of Buck Lane where it is much more walkable. I have to go down the narrow sidewalk, which people usually give me the right of way because I'm pushing a stroller, but if there's two strollers, somebody loses. I stop in front of Haverford Market and wait for the light to turn green so I can cross. But I don't cross vertically because then I would be in the entrance of the gas station. So I have to look for oncoming traffic, cross horizontally, and then cross vertically before the light changes. Adding a restaurant at that corner, which is your safe spot while you're waiting because there's no one coming in or out, would take away the most walkable section for a parent in this neighborhood. If you go up Buck Lane, you get to the 800 block, there is no relief on the sides because of plantings or embankments, and cars are coming from Lancaster, which they would if they were coming to the restaurant. If you turn right on East Railroad, you end up at College Ave with a blind curve where cars go extremely fast. If you take a left on East Railroad, there is some walkability. There is the park, but you can't walk there every day. I've been walking with a stroller for 2 years during a pandemic, quite a bit. And for some variety, you can't just walk one direction. So when we talk about the walkability of our neighborhood, adding a restaurant does not make it more walkable if there's not a walkability infrastructure in place. You're adding cars to an area that is already ill-equipped for people to walk, not attracting more walkers to a restaurant. And if you are, then more cars coming too, and it's just more dangerous.
So do you think that the point is that in your community, which lacks a walking characteristic and lacks the walking infrastructure that you would like to see for your neighborhood, that a property like this then should not have any commercial or
It should be R6. You don't put a business in and hope the walkability infrastructure comes afterwards. And the other thing is we have Lancaster, Bryn Mawr Ave, Haverford Road. There are commercial areas that you can make our residential area walkable to.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to put businesses embedded in the residential zone.
Well, the applicant submitted quite a few letters from your neighborhood of people who said, we'd like to be able to walk to a restaurant in our neighborhood.
I'm sure they would. And if it was 3 or 4 blocks away from me and some guy looking to open a restaurant knocked on my door, I would probably say yes too. But it's on my street and I walk down that road and I know it like the back of my hand. And I don't want it on my street and it doesn't need to be on my street. Maybe this is hearsay, but we had a community meeting and Miss Dana Hall said, I don't know why he's so interested in the property. There's plenty of places to open a restaurant. Well, then go use one of the places that's used for a restaurant. Don't bring it next to some restaurants. Don't go next to people's houses. There are reasons why you do not generally see restaurants.
You do see restaurants throughout the township in places like Brookline, in Oakmont, on some of the restaurants that we talked about earlier. Many of them are directly across the street or fronting on residential properties, right? Do you disagree with that statement?
I am sure there are, yes, I understand there are houses next to restaurants, but we have a choice. Why would we choose to do that?
I have no other questions.
Ed? No question. Jess? Okay.
I have one.
Oh, Jesse.
Sorry, you skipped me. Just more administratively, I noticed that you were not a signatory to the Brentford Neighbors for the Preservation of Residential Zoning. Was that because you were already a?
I was on vacation. I came back from vacation today to make this hearing, so I didn't have a chance to sign it.
Okay, but okay. Originally, he wasn't, and I would just, that was my question. Was it was because you were already a party? So okay, that was my only question.
Josh, did you also hear testimony here this evening from Chris Morse about heavy traffic on Buck Lane during the afternoon?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a difference of opinion between Ms. McCullough and Chris Morse about the volume of traffic on Buck Lane during the afternoon. Which one comports with your understanding of the volume of traffic on Buck Lane?
I would rather not make a definitive statement on how bad traffic is. All I know is that I see cars. I want a quieter residential street. So the current amount of cars that I need to move out of the way of as I walk to the Friends School on Buck Lane, I wish it was less. I also wish they would drive slower. It is an issue of speed. But speed also has to do with the number of cars coming down. You have a higher probability of cars going too fast. So the less cars coming down, I don't want to add to that. I want to make fewer cars come down our street rather than more.
So I would, can I ask you another question then? If they put a 4 apartment complex at the bottom of this property, which they could in theory do by right, introducing 8 cars at least on your street.
There's nothing I can do about that.
Understood, but you would not be in favor of that because in theory it would be putting more cars on your street.
I am okay with it being residential.
Okay.
If you live in the, I could look up a study, but I would assume that if you live in the neighborhood, I know I drive slower in my neighborhood. So one, I think there's a difference between somebody who lives at the bottom of the street and somebody who's driving for DoorDash. Also, we can still pursue other traffic calming things with more residents. That's okay. We can still look to do bike lanes or one-ways. I think that becomes harder with a restaurant, which has a very complicated in and out with the intersection at Haverford Road and Buck Lane.
You're not a traffic engineer, that right?
I am not.
Okay. And you testified just a minute ago that you thought, in your opinion, that more cars on the street would lead to faster speeds?
I said that the more cars there are, the more opportunity there are for cars to go fast as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Unfortunately, we are not through all the testimony, and it is a few minutes after 11. But I haven't heard anybody try to get in the door, so I think we're okay. Kel, next hearing is a one-case hearing.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Our next hearing is scheduled for August 5th. However, it was set aside for the library because I do anticipate quite a bit of interest with that case as well. I think putting both of these cases on one night, no, only one is going to be heard. So the one after that would be September 2nd, which which I have 2 residential cases for, but I think maybe we can do those first so that we're not completely having them
You want to do one on the 19th?
Start, or not be able to be heard at all. That would be.
So, is the board available on the 19th of August? About the 26th? You available that day?
I think I could do either one.
26th? Jesse, you available on the 26th? And Cal, I'm going to ask you if we can get the next, the 26th.
I believe that the planning commission meeting is on the 12th. 26 should be fine. In the event that the planning commission meeting is scheduled for that week, I will have to let the planning commission use the room because we are taking their night tonight. So we've already kicked them out once.
Well, we may have to go in the caucus room or something. I mean, I don't know what their agenda looks like, but once I announce a date here tonight, we're pretty much stuck, right?
We'll have to re-advertise if it's incorrect. So we'll go with the 26th. If it's incorrect, we'll re-advertise.
So we have no hearing scheduled on the 26th. We're going to schedule a hearing on the 26th so we can wrap this case up. Our fifth hearing is, the agenda is completely full, and we'll be in the same position. Maybe that'll give us an override date to finish the fifth hearing on the 26th, since we're jammed on the 2nd. So with that, are you available on the 26th, Pam? Are you available on the 26th? That's of August, by the way. Yeah, we're talking August, right? Yeah. Yes. So then we're going to continue the case to August 26th. And now I'll do it officially. With that, we'll continue this case to our August 26th hearing.
Do you want to make sure that we get that stack of letters?
Oh, they're not marked?
It was supposed to be 8:13.
And so, Arlene, one more thing. When did I announce the decision from the case, the fence case?
August 5th.
August 5th? Okay, so we'll do it on the 5th. Any other questions, any other matters? We're adjourned.